I can hear you.
All right, sorry about that rookie move. I got everything lined up except the dang mics. I didn't turn on the mic this time. All right, so for those of you who don't know, Tony Rodrigues, I'm going to read a quick bio about him. In fact, you can find this on his website, Tony. It's TonyRodrigues.com, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, TonyRodrigues.com.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Tony was abducted from his home in Michigan, enslaved at the age of 10, and endured torturous training program. He was sold to new owners in Peru to perform intuitive work for drug running. Sold off again, he was taken to Seattle to be a sex slave for a satanic worshiping elite. I'm not sure who that is. We can expand on that later. He was subsequently sold to the secret space program, where he served a short period of time on the planet Mars as a support soldier for the Mars Colony Corporation. After the Mars program was canceled, Tony was traded to the Ceres Colony Corporation, where for over a decade he worked on German spaceships as a repairman. He eventually became a cargo engineer for interstellar trade missions. After 20 years of slave work, Tony was age regressed and time traveled back to his bed at the age of 10. In an effort to stop human trafficking these days, Tony has since become an advisor for a foundation investigating unsavory and abusive elite practices, and has helped hundreds of people cope with their emerging memories that are similar to his. Now, first thing I want to start off with is a question from Nat Hall. He asks, is this another Corey Good, or that midget kid who also claims to have been in ultra secret space cadet program? Tony.
Yes and no, I guess. First, hi, Walter. It's been great. We haven't talked in a very long time, and thanks for having me back. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm very honored to be here. To answer that question, I'm another, like Randy Kramer, like Jason Rice. I hate naming people names. I'd like to leave them do their own thing. But I'm another person that experienced a 20-year tour, or a career return program, or a 20 and back. They call it a bunch of different things. But basically, I keep the language as clean as I can. But when I was a child, I pissed off the child of an elite. And one day in school, he pointed me out to him. And that night, or later, it was like that night, I was taken by grays and reptiles, and I was put in a 20-year program. I lived for 20 years. This is exactly how I experienced my life. I grew to the age of 10. I had this incident happen to me. I lived for 20 years in black programs, and I was traded from program to program. And I think this is one of the reasons why I remember, because a lot of people are just taken off world or into one program specific. But I was traded from program to program, and as a result, retrained and did other jobs. So I did several jobs for 20 years. And then at the end of it all, I was put back. So however they do it, I don't have a blueprint to how they accomplished it. I believe it was cloning. I believe they use cloning technology, and it's very easy at a certain point for them, at a certain level of tech. But I have a lot of memories, and it would be weird if everybody believed me what I said. If I came on YouTube on your show and I said exactly what I said without anybody interrupting me or questioning me or anything, if I just told my whole story and everybody believed it verbatim and said, yeah, well, that makes perfect sense, that would be the weirdest thing that ever happened. That would be strange. People should be skeptical. The reason that I still do this and I put up with skeptics, some people are angry. Some people come at me with anger, is so that you have something to go research. Like, take what I don't believe me, take it and run with it, because I've had people volunteer to help me research. So this was 2015, so I'm going on 6 years since I got my memories back, the bulk of my memories back. I always had them, but they weren't really cohesive. It wasn't really a story from beginning to end. And about 2015, I got an MRI scan of my head. And 2 weeks later, I came across Randy Kramer's material, and he explained the 20-year tour. And I went, oh my God, that's what happened. And all the memories came back. It was like, in the first 3 months, I got major years and years of memories back. And I had a job, I had a profession, I had friends, I had women, I had relationships. I had all these things. These memories came back to me, and I didn't know what to do with it. I was scared, really scared. And I started checking it out, and I started working with some researchers, because I wanted to speak to other people that had the same experience that I had just had. of getting 20 years of memories back. There really wasn't anybody back then willing to talk to me about it. So I ended up in the hands of researchers who grilled me about it and checked the things that I said. And lo and behold, even now, 6 years later, we're seeing things come to light that I had said back then that I didn't know confirmed my story. I had no idea, because when you tell a researcher, like, no, it was a triangle craft and it said this and this, when you give details, the researcher doesn't say, oh yeah, that's exactly right. They don't say that. They say, okay, what happened next? And you don't know if you're giving them something damning or something that confirms you. And what I've found is that my recount of it all in the beginning in 2015 really is starting to play out. There have been books released, and with other people that have come forward, government, military officials, and just a lot of other things have developed. I mean, obviously, everybody knows, UAPs or UFOs are on the table right as we speak. And a lot of details that I was in the 20 years, I spent 6 years on the earth. So I was taken to California, Southern California, Inyokurn, and then China Lake. And that's where I went through the programming phase of my very first stop. And then Seattle, and then down to Peru, and then back to Seattle, and then off-world. And then I began the off-world service for the colonies in space. And many things have come to light that have proven my memories of what I remember in space as well. And I keep hoping for something to prove it that it was a dream or something that was wrong. But every time I check things out, I don't get a smoking gun. I don't get the silver bullet, but I get a smoking gun in many things that I check out, especially on Earth.
You know what I like hearing on all of this, and even from the conversation we had the other day, is that you are skeptical, even of your own experience. You're having to go through this, and you're speaking to
Absolutely. So
researchers.
I'm a normal guy, right? I live in Michigan. I'm a woodworker by trade. I'm a lower middle class. I've raised 3 kids. And for me, I do this on weekends. People contact me all through the week ever since I've gone public. I do this on weekends. And when I come back to my desk, when I come back to my green screen here, and I sit down to do this, and I have to remind myself of everything that I went through, because my life just takes, and just in normal life and day-to-day life, I forget about it. I get on with my being an American, and I have to come back, and I'm always like, man, shit, that happened. It happened. It was real. And a lot of people have come at me with a lot of different things. So in the beginning, you were mind controlled, you were wrong, this doesn't happen, what you remember didn't happen, that was fiction. You said it was just like this thing in this movie, that was fiction. And you're mind controlled, or you're not on my favorite is we have a list of everybody that went to space, you're not on it.
What do you
then,
tell these people? What do you say?
Well, I entertain it. Well, here's the thing, I entertain it. I'm fine with it. Please prove me wrong. I'll put it to bed and I'll go back to my life, which is great. I have a normal, good life. I'm not trying to win an election here or anything else. I'm not trying to be deceptive. All of my information is really a small impact in the world. What I want people to know is that this is a reality. That's the thing. I couldn't take this to the grave with me. When I first remembered it, and I started working with, can I name drop?
Yeah, go for it.
So it was Dr. Sala in the beginning, and I emailed him back, and we were emailing back and forth, and there were things in the beginning. So the memory recovery process is really where I've developed. And that's really what happened to me, is now I'm a consultant for people that have the same problem, that they have fragmented memories that they can't make sense of. They have, and that's, so people come to me, and I've developed a memory course because I went through it, because in the first 6 months I had my memories back, and it was what to do with them. And then for every year after that, I'm trying to remember the little things, the brushing your teeth, the laundry, those days when I was there. I was working, and I've developed exercises that helped with that. And a lot of people are going into the hypno regression these days, and I think that it's a double-edged sword. I think that people should really have a foundation of memories to work on before they go to see a regressionist. A lot of people have a sighting or two or something weird in their life, and they go boom straight to the hypno regression, and then it's like a tattoo of a mix of real memories and bad memories. And I feel that people should really take their time and spend some time and work out what happened, get a timeline together,
Well, what I like
and have a
what you
foundation.
said. Sorry to interrupt. I like what you said on the hypnoregression piece. But we know that there are some good hypnoregressionists, and there's some that probably could use a bit of improvement. Specifically, and I've talked to people who've gone through hypnotic regression. There's one gentleman, James Lowe, who did it, and this guy's a lawyer. He spent a whole career as in law. He didn't talk about any of this stuff until I put a camera in front of him, and he talked about how he liked this one particular regression therapist because she didn't ask leading questions. So, and I've seen the regression, people online. Maybe you've seen them too. And I just hit the stop button as soon as they start asking leading questions because they're planting seeds. So for you, you had to have had, as you've mentioned, a block of memories that you started with, right? Now,
So I never got a regression.
so you've
I've
never
never
done the
done it.
regression.
No, I'm kind of afraid to be honest. After what I've seen, I've
Yeah.
seen people. I've worked with people. So since I've come forward publicly, I deal with 2 or 3 people a week, probably. So in 6 years, it's a few thousand people. It's in the thousands, and of people that's they hit me up. In the beginning, it was quite a bit, and it's really slowed down. It's tapered off. I do less interviews now. I have a Patreon show that I do weekly. And I really do a lot less interviews. In the beginning, it was interviews of 3, 4 weeks. So every time I did an interview, people reached out to me and said, "Oh my God, I feel the same way." And I've worked with people that had a regression, and they tell me things, and you're looking for common denominators. You're looking for things that add up, and because a lot of times people that have contact with extraterrestrials, nothing adds up because it's very vague. It's at great distance, and the real purpose is still not known to them of why they're being interacted with. So it's hard to determine what's really going on. You're looking for common denominators. You're looking for things that other people have experienced as well, and also things that happen kind of on a schedule. And people that have a regression, I've seen them add up where it's one direction and the regression took them another, and I can't convince them that what's really going on from what I can see. I say, well, everything's adding up. That looks like you participating in these programs, and they don't believe it because the regressionist took them somewhere else. And there are regressionists that they go, okay, now you're in a relaxed state. What happened to you? Or tell me about this. And then they have a few things happen, and then it's like, what did you see when you're on the spaceship?
Right, because
Without
there's
any
that.
mention of a spaceship,
Right. Where'd that
without any
come
mention
from?
of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a very dangerous thing. It's a very dangerous thing because in that state of mind, your mind doesn't let go of that suggestion ever again. It's like a tattoo.
So there's a bit of
And
preparation. And even the regression therapist will send you, the good ones will send you a questionnaire to advise you, on, are you sure you want to do this? Because it could reveal some things.
I spoke in Florida, and I did a workshop in Florida at the Star Family Conference, and this year, and I did a workshop on memory recovery, and there was a girl named Kate, and she was her family did regression, and she did regression. She's very talented at it. She told me things, what I mean, when we talked privately. She told me things that were like very advanced in hypnotic regression that she's done. Her parents did it, so she was around her whole life, and she had no idea until we were in the middle of my workshop that the 20-year tour, that the 20 and back phenomenon was a thing. It was always past lives or some kind of abduction thing. So she had no idea that people could have 20 years worth of memories in their life in an organic timeline in this life. So a lot of them are looking for past lives. You talk about time on Mars or serving time in space on the back of the moon, and it's a past life, or it's 1,000 years ago. And so once you're in a hypnotic state, the regressionist is putting that there. It can become a tattoo. It can become a block. It can become almost as bad as the original block. And probably that's how they do a lot of blocks. They don't have my experience with the space program. What I remember is when I went back and they started to program me. Jason Rice called them parting gifts appropriately, but they start programming you to forget things, to not remember. And it's not one thing. It's not one process. You don't just sit and they put an eye drop in you, or you don't get to stare at a screen and then that's it. They put you in booths. They do surgical things, and they hit areas of the brain. One thing is words and places and numbers. The next thing is faces and recognition. The other thing is shapes of ships. You know what I mean? There are several, it's a very multi-layered programming to make you forget your service there. And so a lot of people get memory in one or two of those layers. Some people more. I like to think I have memory in many of those layers, but there are a few, like I still have a hard time with the names. You know, Elena Denon has come forward,
Right.
and she has a lot of information on the names of the races there, and I just can't remember them. And I can remember talking about them like I knew. Uh, I remember having conversations with people, and it was an everyday business. It was an everyday thing. We knew the names of of nearby species that were coming by. We knew their names. We knew what about them. And I can't remember the wording. I also can't remember faces. When I see people that I knew, when I can see physically in my mind. I can remember being on the ship where I worked, where I spent years working at my post doing cargo engineering. And the people around me, I see their face is gray. It's grayed out. It's a gray blur. I can see them and their build. Some people are short and skinny, some people bigger, but I always see a kind of a gray blur. Some people I can kind of get a grasp on their face, but that memory, because it's a separate part of the brain, that what I've been able to determine is that facial recognition is its own little area of the brain, and words and vocabulary is a separate part of the brain. So they target all those individually.
You've covered a lot of ground here.
I know. I'm kind of in a
it's-
whirlwind here. I want to get back to Nat.
Yeah, it's like,
Does he have
here it
another
comes.
follow-up?
For those of you who like feeding from a fire hose, here's Tony. I like that you're a woodworker. I do woodworking as well on the side. I'm not a professional at it, but yeah, it's very cool. It's a very artistic outlet.
Getting old. I'm getting old for it. It's a
Yeah,
lot of work.
yes, it is. Yeah, but there were some questions in the arena of proof. There's one that popped in here. I want to kind of run past you real quick. Maybe not
Sure.
necessarily proof, but more about it had to do with the memories themselves. Mark Jarnigan asks, are there distinguishing elements that show these events happen rather than implanted memories?
Absolutely. So the house in Seattle that I was at, I stayed there for about 2 years from around 85 to 80, the end of 86, is there. And in 2016, after my first round of interviews with Dr. Sala for Exopolitics, that was at Mount Shasta in California. I left that weekend and got on a plane and went to Seattle and drove to the island and went to the house, which is now for sale. The owners, well, I'm going to leave it at that. It's kind of I'm poking a hornet's nest by naming names. I have named names. I have worked with parts of the government. I've worked with people that were finding kids and that did rescued kids that were sold into slavery. I worked as an advisor with a private group, and I've given the names to authorities of the people that had me then. But I don't share them publicly because they still have very real people. They're still very powerful, wealthy people that can make my life and my family's lives very complicated. So that's one course of memory. I was on the phone the whole time. I knew my way around an island near Seattle, one of those, there's a bunch of islands around Seattle. I went to the island and I can prove without a doubt, I have a family, my sister, brother, mother, father, cousins, everybody can prove and vouch that I'd never been to Seattle, not once in my life, not even for a layover, not even to the airport for a layover. I'd never been to Seattle. When I went back to the island, Google had took me a certain way to the house. Because I found it on Google Earth first. Like in the first couple of weeks, I found it. I went, oh my God, it's real. Holy shit. And so I went there and I mapped it the night before, and I was following it. And when I got into town, I went, no, that's not the way. This is the way. And the way that I went from memory was actually the better way because Google was going to take me over about a half mile of dirt road. And I went a little bit farther out of my way, but I took a hardball basically the whole way. And when I got close to the house, which is in the woods, I said, oh, we're almost there. Because I remember when I was back then, I would ride in the passenger side of the car and I'd say, we'd always call it out, we're almost there. Because we was, how kids are like, are we there yet? We're almost there. And I said the same thing. And lo and behold, I was only about 200 yards from the house. And when I pulled in, it's a gated home. So I didn't get up there and it's for sale. But I had uncanny memory. Also, I went to the store. I knew my way around the candy where the store there was a local mom and pop store. And back then in the 80s, the candy was 5 cents and 10 cents. And nowadays it's 35 and 40 cents. They have a bin. in the middle of the store that has candy for sale. And it was exactly, I knew my way around the store. I knew where the things were. It's just how I left it. I also knew. Well, that's where I was. He was a satanic elite, and I was living there. And unfortunately, we served as pedophile sex servants for them during fundraiser parties for the local politics in the 80s. I was on Gaia, so I was on Cosmic Disclosure. They cut the whole episode out about it because they have a lot of they had a lot of, well, no, they had a lot of controversy over occult things on Gaia, so they just cut that whole episode out. I filmed 4 episodes, they cut one, only 3 made it on. But I was going to say that all these people were found, they checked out. Um, that is a contention. It's one area of proof. The other thing is, one researcher I worked with was a former practicing Satanist. And I was able to describe, so again, I can prove, I mean, it's difficult to prove, it's he said, she said, but I really have had no contact with Satanism in my organic life. My parents, my mom's she was Episcopalian, very devout Catholic woman. I've had no kind of alternative religion in my life. And while I was being researched, I described some of the ceremonies I saw, and somebody that was a researcher that was a former Satanist said, wow, how there's no way he could know that. You have to actually be not only a Satanist, but you have to be kind of high up in the church before you even see any of that stuff. So and she said, that's exactly, nobody would know that. So these were details that supported my account. So that's one thing in the early years in Seattle. Inyokern, the buildings that I remember in Inyokern, I had a researcher go and look up Inyokern, and I was working with a researcher, and we were trying to connect people, and we found the CIA documents, we found funding for the doctors, we found a paper trail, a pretty impressive paper trail. I also found videos where they were celebrating the fact that they had a great process by bringing children to near-death experiences. They had great process, they said they had great progress in remote viewing and in telling the future by bringing children to near-death experiences. And that's exactly the technology that I had described with them. But the buildings that I remember going through the process in Inyokern, I found this on Google Earth too. I have not been to Inyokern personally. I plan to go. Just the 3 buildings in the airport there. So the researcher said, well, I'm going to look up their tax record, because every building in America, there's a website that you can subscribe to that has tax records on the permits pulled and yearly, that the building exists. And when he looked up those 3 buildings, they're on Google Earth. I could show you a picture of them. They don't exist. They're not there. They're not. There's no paper. There's a requirement for tax records for buildings to have a tax assessment. Every structure in America has a tax assessment, except these. And what he found was that it's called a special district. And inside those buildings, there's literally, the local law enforcement has no jurisdiction. So children could have been experimented on. It's perfectly legal. There's a legal clarification for it. It was called the California Special District. They're all over the United States. These were California ones, but the special districts are all over the United States. There are over 3,000 properties like that in California. So was it, like I said, is it a silver bullet? No, but it does support my theory. Another quick thing before we move on, Walter, I know I'm getting drug out. The proof is a mountain. That's why I don't have one thing. This picture behind me, I say it in all my shows. I'm a broken record when I say it. This picture behind me was a geyser. I remember flying over it in the late 90s in a spacecraft, watching the geyser from one of these, and goes about 10 kilometers up. It was a geyser, and then salt and magnesium snowed back down, and that's what those deposits were. So Maya came forward while the Dawn probe was on its way to Ceres in 2015. It got there in 2016. NASA made a preliminary observation and scan, like a spectral analysis of the Okata crater back then, and they thought it was a slurry of other chemicals. And I said no. And so with my research back and forth with Dr. Sala, I said no, it's salt. That's salt. It's briny salt. And there's a little bit of magnesium in it. So it's like an Epsom salt, but not quite. It's salt. And NASA, there was a back and forth. They said no, and they had to go through all the data, and the Dawn probe kept going and got closer and closer for the next few years. Last year in 2020, August of 2020, NASA published a report. They had concluded it was salt. So that was a very confirming thing. That was a very big thing for me. It might sound small to you guys, but for somebody to do that is pretty rare, pretty unlikely. So to be able to call that out, and I stood my ground back then, and it turned out that it was right. So it was a form of proof. So I'm sorry. I keep looking for things that'll disprove too. I had, like I said, there's been some really whack theories on why I remember all I do. I remember a lot, and it's not like most people that come forward have only a few memories. I have literally years of memories. Also, I did an interview years ago, and I described my job I did on the ship was cargo engineering, and basically I input length, width, and height and weight of the boxes that we would take on, whatever it was, into the computer, and then the computer would print out a stacking report that I would give to the guys down in the engineering bay, and they would stack it, and it would be the most efficient way to stack those particular things. And somebody contacted me from lived out in Italy in the Mediterranean and said he worked for Pan, I forget the company, but he said, I do your job for cargo ships. I do your exact job. You described my job to the T. He contacted me. He said, I do your job, man. He said, what about the tipping report? I said, no, I didn't have a tipping report because I was in the short cargo's base. So anything over a meter, we sent to the rear main cargo bay, and they did the tipping report. So I only did 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter boxes. And everything else bigger than that went into the main cargo bay. So I didn't have to, we kind of were, comrades in that we both had a profession. But the thing is, I remember that career. I've never done that in my life either. I'm a wood guy, and I've been doing woodworking for 30 years now. I've never done cargo assignment, not even in a factory or nothing. I've never done shipping or receiving anywhere. I did it in space, working for the Ceres Colony Corporation for a German breakaway group in the late 90s. And I remembered that professionalism, that those professional aspects of the job. There were things that I remembered, and it lined up with actually the trade, with what it does. So off the top of my head, I know there's a lot more things that support my story, but I'm kind of I feel like I'm rambling.
Not at all. Well, we all ramble. I mean, look at me at the beginning of this thing, rambling without the mic on. Can you guys hear me okay now? I know that occasionally what I'll do is I'll hit the mute button because the cooling fans on my computer are rather loud, and I don't want that carrying over. So, Tony, there was one thing that you'd mentioned about working in your position there on the ships, which I thought was really interesting. It had to do with gravity. There was an odd gravity anomaly in the cargo bay. You want to share a bit with that?
There were a few gravity anomalies on the ship, so it had an odd shape to it, and towards the rear of the ship, there was a design flaw. So they had acquired the ship from some other race or some other corporation, and then they brought it onto Ceres into the hangar bay, and they modified it for themselves. So the ship got worked on for, 6 to 9 months. It got worked on by them and modified for the Ceres Colony Corporation, but the ship was built somewhere else. It's kind of like they bought it from somebody. In the rear cargo bay, in the main cargo bay, there were times when entire stack, in the beginning, in the first years of service, there was never cargo there in the area and toward the rear of the cargo bay towards the door. We never really had cargo there, so nobody knew. But after a while, the cargo bay started to fill up, and they would just, for storage, they would stack things. And the boxes would move in flight all by themselves. They would scoot 3-4 feet. So they put grip tape, and that didn't work. And it wasn't every time. It wasn't every flight. They didn't know why. They didn't understand. And then so they eventually roped them down. And when they roped them, the boxes were crushed into the ropes. They were crushed. So they were, what's going on here? And then the engineers took a better look at it. They painted the floor. They actually redid the floor and put grip tape and they did a lot of things that they could to try to stop these stack of boxes, this area, from moving around. And what they found was that during certain maneuvers, it was like a left turn loop. There was certain maneuvers that they did that perturbed the field of gravity that was propelling the ship, and it would move. And there was nothing they could do. It was like a titanic force that would move those. So there's nothing they could do. So what they did was they had to report every time there was cargo in that area. They taped it off. And if they did have to put cargo there, they had to let the bridge know so that they wouldn't perform those maneuvers. They could enter it into the computer, and the computer wouldn't even let the ship do it.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I do have a question here from Free Range Brain. By the way, thank you for the tip. Greatly appreciated. Free Range Brain asks, from your near-death experience memories, is the light at the end of the tunnel after death a trick to keep the souls trapped on Earth? Is there a soul trapping machine on the moon? What do you have to say about that?
I don't believe so. I don't believe that there's a soul trapping machine on the moon. I believe that it would be that I believe that it is possible to trap a soul, for one, but it's a different form of technology. It's not a machine that would get the public at large when they pass away and just take random souls. I believe it would be somebody that would be taken in the program, and it would. The technology is behind your DNA and your brain tissue, your brain matter. So if they have cultured brain matter that they can keep alive, which is very difficult, then they can pull your soul back after you die. They can pull it into different directions. It may explain why a lot of people are having a lot of people have reported to me they go to bed and they wake up and they're somewhere else and do service. And then they go to bed and they wake up in their life. And a lot of people have had a lot of goings on like that. And I say, wait, she's like, no, we were on a mission last night. We were on a mission. This is current. And I think it's something like that technology where they have got people and then they can, while they go to sleep or whenever they time it, and they can pull, because your soul, your consciousness turns out really is a form of currency. And they are using our level of awareness. I call consciousness awareness. Our level of awareness, they can use it as a currency, as a tool. And so it drives clones. I believe when you clone something, it's got a very small amount of consciousness or awareness, and it's not a very talented, not a very good clone. So you need to take that spark of life consciousness from either the original one or from some other source, and provide it so that you can get a very bright individual clone for whatever purpose, if it's going to be a worker or a soldier or whatever. And I don't think there's a machine about it. I don't think that the Earth is a big soul trapping thing. I think the Earth is a natural body that's just infested with it. We're in a very busy part of the galaxy for commerce, and we're not a planet that's out of the off the beaten path. We're in the middle. We're kind of like in a very high traffic area of our galaxy. So if you're coming from another galaxy, you end up on our side of you end up near our system. So there are people that can, there are natural Rosen bridges or portals, whatever you want to call them, that provide intergalactic travel. So travel to another galaxy. And well, there's one near us. So that's why we get a lot of weirdness around the Earth. And that's actually why the Earth is claimed, and why the silence and everything. We're basically a test bed, and we're a farm for consciousness. So people can come and take consciousness, races can come and take consciousness and genetic material and go elsewhere in the galaxy off the beaten path to less populous planets and set up a slave labor force or a city or whatever they want to do
Were you a part of that?
and use our, excuse me?
Were you a part of that, taking consciousness for
Yes.
slave labor?
We had people as cargo many times. We would drop them off. We would pick up people as cargo or soldiers or hybrid soldiers that were half robot, half something else, that were basically probably an implanted consciousness from Earth. And we would take them and drop them off to other cargo ships or other bases.
Yeah, I'm glad.
We went sometimes 3, 4 planets a day and moved cargo all over the galaxy.
I'm glad you mentioned soldier specifically. Tony, what is a super soldier, and would you consider yourself one of those things?
I am not super at anything, and I was not. And I was in a combat program. I actually was in a combat unit for a short time for the Mars Colony Corp. And what I was a support soldier. So they were trying to get numbers of not well trained, they were trying to crank out very easily, very minimally equipped, minimal training, uh, eyes and ears and boots on the ground to assist the real super soldiers that were well equipped, well trained, very expensive, and took a long time to generate. They wanted to match numbers of the insectoids that were on Mars at the time. And I was one of those. And what they found was that everything that we did, that the insectoids adapted way faster than what they had anticipated. And the entire program basically didn't have a future. The insectoids would just adapt quicker. So they canceled it. And so that's what I was. But there were many versions of soldier that I heard about up there and that I witnessed. And the Mars soldiers were U.S. Marines U.S. Marine Special Division that I came in contact with and worked alongside for a few months.
So
Yes.
you've actually seen these soldiers. Is it the Randy Kramer narrative type
Well,
soldier, or?
yes. Well, the Mars Colony Corp, and they were leased to the Marine Corps, and they were Americans, and I was in basically embedded with them. Myself and about a dozen other guys like me that were in the same boat that I was, that were support soldiers. It was a test for a corporation. I was owned by a corporation, and it was a test bed program. So it was a small base it was a base that had been abandoned because it had been attacked and there were casualties there. So they abandoned the base, and there were only 50 or 80 people. There wasn't many people there at the time. It was big enough to house like 200 people on 5 levels of underground base somewhere on Mars. And so yeah, it was the Randy Kramer narrative. But the soldiers had a full set of armor. We just had environmental suits, and the soldiers had a full set of armor that was weighed as such to where they had I hope I'm getting this term right, like negative buoyancy. So they didn't feel any of the weird weight. Their suit was weighed down enough to where they had the same kind of ratio of weight that they would on Earth. So they could walk and run and jump the exact same way that they would on Earth. They could run. And we were in suits that were just very thin. We had a small backpack. We had an open face shield that gave us, we had things that blew oxygen as we needed it. But our suits were a lot lighter, and so as a result, we were lighter and we couldn't run. You ended up having like a long hop, and we were less mobile than the soldiers were because of that. It actually worked out for them to have more equipment on.
So let's move away from this. I want to touch on something a little more tactile here. I like this question. Let's see, where is it? I saw it here in the feed. Anyway, in a nutshell, okay, they're asking, this is Gipporus, Gipporus, Gipporus. Sorry if I'm hacking the YouTube name. They want to know, what's it like to leave or land on a planet via a craft visually? Thank you, Tony.
I'm sorry, I just logged on to the feed. What, could you give me that question one more
Sure.
time?
Yeah, they ask, what's it like to leave or land on a planet via a craft? What's it like visually? Thank you, he says.
Well, when there were most of the time I was at my post, which was not near a window, it was towards the center of the ship. And so I didn't witness a lot. There were times on my break, most of the time when we were on another world, we were in high altitude. And so when I went to my break, during my lunch break, and I'd look out the window, if the view window was on, then I would just see clouds, like high altitude. There were times when we heard the report of what happened, and there was if they jumped, so the ship could have had a jump capability of make its own portal and jump out and in. And if it jumped into the upper atmosphere, the thin atmosphere, it would get coated with ice. And actually, it was a danger. So they would jump in space and then fly into the atmosphere. And there were times when they just misjudged that and tried to get close, and they got atmosphere on them, and the ship got coated in a couple inches of ice. There was a time when I was walking when we left, when we were leaving, and we were in a cloudy situation where you looked out the window and it was just clouds, like a rain cloud. And I was standing there, and all of a sudden the ship took off, and it was mind blowing how much speed it just went from zero to fast, and the entire planet. Like I was standing looking out the window, and and all of a sudden there was a whoosh of all the clouds went by in a straight line, and then the curve and the planet just disappeared. I mean, just that fast. It went by, and I was just blown away. I went, wow, I had no idea that we could go that fast. And I'd already worked on these things for years before I was aware of that. And It was impressive. That was something that was one of those things that I never forgot. That was just, it was that impressive that I never forgot that. The other thing is the cargo ship that I worked on was hard capped at 10 meters above any surface. So whenever they came down to a surface, they had no ability. It was always in the air, floating. It was anti-grav and it was always on. The ship they could not turn it off and land it somewhere on feet. It would stay 10 meters above any surface permanently. So there was a little lift with tethers. I forget what they called it. Something lift. Oh, I got to look up some German words for that. See I remember what they called it. But anyhow, it was basically four cables. There were four separate cables, and it was supposed to hold three guys or four guys. It was supposed to hold four guys, but we only did it in two because when it got loaded down, the elevator would shake, and it was scary. But it was about 30 feet that you would go down on the ship so that you could set foot on. So that's how we went down and set foot on wherever we were. Like there were times when we went to Diego Garcia, and there were times we went to other worlds where we set foot on them. And there was an inner Earth stop. In South America, there was a subterranean cavern where we would drop off and receive cargo from a more advanced species. And we set foot. I remember I wrote it down the luft. Then we did that a few times.
Tony,
I don't know if that.
that works for me. We've got a very active group here popping in questions, and that's very much appreciated. We've got here somebody asking, can you comment on the current Earth events and the secret space connection?
Happily. I don't know where it's going to go. We have a lot of credible people giving us information that points to different directions. So we have some credible people saying that we're in deep crap and we're going to go into a slavery scenario. There are other people that say we're going to get a false flag alien invasion where there's going to be casualties. And we have people saying that we are being taken care of by a galactic federation of worlds that's been very victorious in the efforts of saving us from these things. And so we have a lot of information coming from heavy information, a lot of, very impactful things. So I don't have a read on it. I have a feeling like, we're not meant for a bad existence that, it's not meant to be. So I have a feeling that we're going to be okay, but we are definitely at the tipping point. As if you ever thought your life was out of the ordinary, you chose to incarnate. If you had a choice, we are living right now at a bottleneck in the history of this entire planet. Of every person that's ever existed in the past, this generation is probably going to see the most important event. And we are very close to a disclosure event where we're either going to join the galactic community or we're going to be victims of them. And so that's where we're at. And these are things that could break and happen quick. It's very fast. I think the lockdown and the virus scare, the health scare we've had recently is part of it. I think they did things to restructure, and I think that the precautions that we took not only limited the exposure to a certain cold, but got rid of a bunch of others. I think we cleaned up, we sterilized the environment. The whole planet was wearing masks and washing their hands. That had to have a great positive effect for the common cold, for the environment, our environment. Because before that, years ago, you go 5-6 years ago, I got sick every year. I got sick every single year, and I caught a good cold and I needed to get some antibiotics. So that's different now. So we've changed our environment. Literally, the world has been changed in the last year over what happened in the last year and a half. So that's something I think that is, if you were going to have ETs come down, if you were going to invite other species from elsewhere in the cosmos to come visit, you would clean your house first. And I think we had a round of house cleaning, whether it was nefarious people that behind it or not. But I think that these are steps we're seeing towards it. We're also seeing steps towards very questionable social reform. And the things that I experienced up there, what I learned up there about other species is that, we have to be way more acceptive of certain behavior. I'm talking about sexual behavior. We have to, and I'm not going to touch anything or endorse in any way any of the pedophilia, period. I'm talking about homosexuality and bisexuality and all the gender stuff that's coming out now. Um, that's how I remember not a lot of races, but of many races, they had a different sexual culture, and many had many different things sexually that 20 years ago we would not be accepted of if they were to come down and visit us. So I see things happening in that direction, and I like to think that it's for the good of, I just post disclosure, because the idea of disclosure is not just knowing, it's participating. I mean, I think everybody wants to go, you know what I mean, on a spaceship, but don't we want them to come visit us too? Don't we want exchange people to come down here and teach us things? Don't we want, and they're people. If they're an ET, if it's a lizard or a sponge or a monkey, whatever it is, if it can speak and has a few 100,000 words, it's a person. They're people. Don't we want people from other worlds to come down here and spend time with us and teach us what they know and learn from us as well? And so we want that to happen. We want people to visit us, and we want to be able to visit them. And so we're going to have to be tremendously more accepting of behavior that we don't approve of. And we've seen the first steps of that. So
Great answer. Yeah, great answers, Tony. So I've got another question here from MER. This is in regards to the craft that you flew on. They're asking, what does it run on? Fuel, magnetics, solar, etc.
So my understanding of it, so there were a lot of things that, like, there were years that I had no idea that it had a weapons system. When I got my memories back, I still had no idea that there was a weapons department. It was highly compartmentalized. The reason being, if you come across an alien ship in space, ship to ship, there are species that can access we're not very complicated mentally. Our species, we're not. There are species that can just take you over mentally, naturally, without a machine. They can walk in the room and they can make you piss yourself. They can make you do whatever they can make you do one hand and marionette. They can override your free will in your mind and control you. And if you come across another ship like that, then they could scan the ship for there were defenses that they had. There was a method of defending against it that was very difficult. So they only did the bridge crew, and they compartmentalized the ship. So what they did was, the people in cargo, we had no defense against it, so they kept us dumb. They say, so I had no idea of the weapon system, how fast the ship could go, where we were from, none of that. And that way, if I was scanned and they took all the information I had, they would get not much information. That being said, I was aware that the ships that we were on, the cargo ship that I was on, had a power source that was basically leased. It was like a 0 point, and that's misleading because that's not exactly how it worked. It was a power generator with a certain amount of output. So energy was free. They had machines that created energy for free. So there was no fuel going into it. They just required maintenance. Every once in a while, somebody had to maintenance the thing. But it was about power output. It wasn't about fuel. It was about power output. So if you leased from another species your generator, it would only give you so much power, and their generators would give them more. So the warships had several generators on them, and they could jump farther and faster. So they could jump and jump and jump. Our ship had to jump and wait for a few minutes and then jump. And it was a shorter jump that it could do each time. Not each time, but it was shorter than a warship. So the power output was the name of the game. It was about power output. So that's what did the ship. The other thing was on the Ceres colony. So there were about 225,000 people living inside Ceres colony at the time, plus visitors. And there was a microgravity environment. So all the floors had gravity plating that was powered. And I'm talking about miles and miles and miles of gravity plating that was powered. So they had generators that did that for the same exact thing like the ships, but they were always hungry, starved for more, and they did not have the technology to build their own. they had to lease them and actually had a trade agreement with some other species. I guess the reasoning behind it is there's a resource that they need. There's an element that's common in the center, towards the center of galaxies, and not on the outside of galaxies. There's elements in there that are easier to make things like this out of, and so those species that are indigenous there don't give it away free. It's a guarded resource that makes the larger high output free energy machines.
This almost sounds like Pandora, Look at all that cheddar.
Yeah, right. The unobtainium, or what was that? I forget what it's called.
Well, it's something like unobtained, whatever it is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's a lot of elements that we're unaware of that are just not around our area of the galaxy, or stars, excuse me, star regions that are our age, regions of stars that are our age. You have to go somewhere else. And that's actually a big cornerstone of galactic trade, which is a very advanced thing. So the other thing that my testimony, that you don't hear too much, that I think is a huge lie that we've got from Hollywood, is that life is far apart, that it takes you a long time to get from one end to the other to the galaxy. Like, it takes you a month to get to the other side of the galaxy and back, even at faster than light. And that it's sporadic, that there's not very much life, that once in a while there's a planet. Really, that's not the case. There's actually a base around every star. 7 out of 10 stars has an Earth, and it's everywhere. And with the technology, once you get into space and start trading, like the Ceres Colony Corporation could go to the other side of the galaxy very quickly and back home again in the same day. And in fact, we could use natural portals and go to several, not all, but several other galaxies and make a few jumps there and still come home in the same day. And it was a day at the office. We left and we left and we got back about the same time. The ship would also, if you can travel space-time on that level, you can travel time. So the ship would leave at 7 a.m. and get back at 7 a.m., even though we worked 8 hours. And because the clock of Ceres had a shorter day, I think it was right around 20 hours, 20-hour day or something. But it ended up being a longer day for us because we were in flight crew. And actually, my 20-year clock, when you do the math of the years that I went and on certain events that happened in my life, it was basically 18 years chronologically. But those extra 2 years I did on missions, I did the math, and it was about 6 years of flight missions, of temporal missions like that, of basically five a week, 5 8-hour days, 8 to 10 hour days a week. There were times we stayed out the longer, but I did the math, it worked out. And that's exactly how I remember it, how it went down.
Regarding Ceres, I've got a question here from Free Range Brain asking, were there any chapels or church type buildings on Ceres?
That's a great question. Not that I'm aware of. There had to be, because people talked to me. There were people that I worked with on the ship that said that they did privately, because the Ceres Colony Corporation was basically a military outpost, and the military was in complete control. There was not a vote or anything like that. It was a military government, like I don't know what they call that, like a military dictatorship, and they pushed atheism, at least on us. Everybody in the military got atheism put on them because it made sense to not have people believe that if you had to pull a trigger against another advanced life form, that there was a God involved, or that was, or like a law of one, like it was you. It just makes sense to turn people into atheists. There's a lot more pliable to un likely, excuse me, undesirable commands. So they would carry out undesirable commands if they were atheists. However, there were people that were high ranking that told me that they did practice a religion that was very secretive and between them. And it was a religion basically based with a creator God. So there had to be a chapel somewhere.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. I mean, all this, I'm just kind of mulling through my head, just a lot of different things. With the numbers of people who've had these types of experiences and are actually coming to you for help, I can't help but think, how much how much of them getting to a point where they're now accepting of their memories, that they're part of the secret space program, specifically 20 and back program? How much of that, in your assessment, do you think is you've got some bona fide people who are with the space program and other people who are just like wannabes, maybe they're faking it, or maybe they're just or misled, like we talked about earlier. So that's kind of maybe three different buckets we have here. What are your thoughts?
There are certainly people that want to be involved, and they don't have a lot. If once you press into a few questions, there's not a lot they can come out with. That doesn't mean there are also people that say they were involved, and the things they tell me are just completely unbelievable. And that doesn't mean they weren't involved. That just means they don't have clear memory. Like I said, I made mistakes in the first 6 months of my memories. I was still assembling in it, kind of like, I had the memories, but they were kind of in a whirl, in a fog, and so I was pulling out memories in the wrong order, and it made me get some questions wrong, and so that's normal. How could you expect somebody to have details from 30, 40 years ago that were purposely erased and then remember every little detail? So the people I've worked with, I've grouped into three categories. I've found that they fall into three categories of ET contact. So these are people that have been interacted with a non-human intelligence, on some level. And the first one is human military programs. So Solar Warden, the Marine Corps, the U.S. military, England. There's the Asians have their own, China. There's an Asian fleet. There's a United Nations fleet. These are people that are taken. They're not always used for a 20-year tour. Sometimes they're used for genetic things. Sometimes they're used for other experiments, and they're put back. And these are my lab people. So that's one whole category. And there's a lot of common denominators you can get by talking to them and getting a time frame together that begin to emerge. And it lets me believe that they were dealing with it. So the group that took them were humans from Earth originally. And they come down with their level of technology, and they take the person and they carry out whatever business they have in mind. The second group is a draconian group. So the local empire, as you will, that has dominion over our region of space are the reptilians, a draconian reptilian. And there's actually quite a different lot of races that belong to this group. But they take people, and those people tend to have worse experiences. Basically, I was taken by the category 1 and shifted off to category 2. Those people that interact with that group tend to have bad things happen to them. So their memories are very traumatic. And thankfully, it's not a lot of people. The third group is everybody else. So what I found is that, and this is why a lot of researchers, a lot of very scientific people think it's gibberish, because the third group is all levels of technology. So there are ETs that interact with people just telepathically from their own planet down to the Earth. They have telepathic, they have out-of-body thing, they meet each other, they travel, and then they're back in their body, and they're never left, and they didn't do it 20 years, and there was no mark on them, there was nothing. It was completely mental, because they're very advanced. Or a deceptive mind, who knows what it is, but this is everybody else. There are other people that I've talked to that had great things happen to them. They had ships that could fly through solid things, and they were taken down, and there was a girl that traded her eggs, and these ETs came down. They looked sort of like a gray, like a blue-gray. They look different than anything else that we're used to. And they asked her straight up, they asked her permission. They said, "We want to take some of your eggs." And she had dental problems, and they fixed them. And she woke up the next day with her not needing her root canal, and her dental problems, like a great deal of dental healing had taken place overnight. And it was an amicable situation. And these were an advanced species that had nothing to do with the humans or the Draco. They just flew through our area. They needed something, and they made a deal with her, and it was a good experience for her. So there's that third category is very big, and it involves everybody else, because you don't know what level of tech you're dealing with. Even though we have space travel at a much higher level than the public knows, we have the 20-year tour, the career return technology, life extension technology, cloning technology. time travel technology. We have all these things. We're still very kind of low on the overall scale of technology. So when you come up with a higher technology, people that have interacted with something on a higher level of technology, more mental, then that's in the third category. So I've
So
come across a lot of
those
people.
would be the non-criminals then, the non-felons that you speak of.
They're all felons.
Oh,
They're all felons. You got to knock on the front door. If you want my permission to go, you got to knock on the front door. If they just appear in your room, that's a
well,
felony.
what about this gal, with her eggs? I mean, how did that go? And did she ask for the permit, the contact first, or did they come to
No,
her?
they came and just took her up. I'm sure. I don't know if they would have put her back if that how that worked. But I'm holding
Little
my ground
extortion
on
going
this.
there?
I'm holding my ground on this because it's something I want to see changed.
Okay, fair
I
enough.
think a lot of people, I think a lot of people, I think millions of people today, if an ET said, look, we want you to come into space with us. You're not going to like it, all of it. We're going to do labor, but we're going to travel around the galaxy and we want you to work for us for 20 years. I think millions of people would sign up. I think they would agree to it because people are just so curious. People want the truth and want to know what is really up there. Because we know, because everybody kind of knows that there's more than what we're being lied to. It's outrageous. And just lately we're starting to see it. The lying mechanism, it's really got, they pulled the line kind of thin and we can kind of see through it. And but they've been at it for a long time, and people deep down know that there's a lot more going on up there. But and I think that people would be in a situation to say yes. And especially if they said, we'll bring you back safely, you'll be fine when we bring you back. You will go, oh yeah, sure, sign me up. Even if it was horrible.
Well, how about you? I mean, would you? I mean, silly question. I'm not
Would
going
I
to ask.
do it again?
Well, would you do it again? Well, that's not the question, but go ahead. Since you posed it, go ahead and let's ask that question, Tony. If you were offered this, would you do it again?
In the context I was offered it, I wouldn't know back then. I was a 10-year-old boy when they sat down. They sat me down. They had to get my permission. They found that people that go and they ask your permission, if you don't give permission, those people tend to suicide later on in the program. So they get your permission. But so they asked me, I was a
Well,
10-year-old boy.
that's after they take you by force, though. That's after
You're already taken,
abducting you.
exactly.
But
Yeah, right.
if we're different, if let's skip all the
You mean
pedophilia
if they
stuff.
sent me a message, if they knocked on the front door and did it properly and said, look, we want you to come
Well,
with us.
even if you're like that woman, who got a benefit out of it, maybe they took her, they helped her, and then maybe they come along and they make an offer. Would you go?
Maybe. I think
Maybe.
so.
Okay. All right.
I'd love to go back up. I would tell you right now, I would love to go back up as a free man and not get tortured and go through some of the things, not do the hard labor. I'd love to go back up there as a tourist or just a free man. If there was a job I could do, I would love to go back up in
Is
the
everybody
streets.
up
I would
there a
love.
slave then? Is everybody up there a slave working? All of them?
The block that I was in had something like 40,000 people, 30 or 40,000 people were slaves. But the same situation that we have. So the Ceres, and I'm only speaking about the Ceres colony, which they weren't allowed to interact with a lot of people, even in our solar system. Saturn was off limits, Venus was off limits, most of the moons of Jupiter, they couldn't interact with those people because they were slavers. And uh, so just speaking for them, they were into the same situation that we are. And that is our people that are in control of us, that are dictating policy, the people that we have elected or hired to work for us, to manage us, our society, are keeping them in the dark. We're being kept in the dark. The people that have classification, people that have security clearance know, and they are purposely not telling us what they have access to. The Ceres colony had the same exact thing. They were like the general populace believed that the earth was dead, that there was an accident, there was a bombing on the earth that killed everybody on the earth, and there was no reason to go there. The general populace was completely lied to and was under their own form of mental slavery. It's a slavery, not having you. Freedom comes from knowledge, from knowing things. Free is what, especially for us as a human, what our consciousness, at our level of awareness, it's about knowledge. We're confused and we need knowledge. So to keep somebody more confused on purpose is a form of slavery. So they were like that, and other colonies were like that as well, and other worlds that we went to were like that. There were planets we went to where it was a black deal, where the people around the populace of the world had no idea that there was life in space. and we were trading with their governments, the same situation like we got now with us. And so that was elsewhere in the cosmos. There were many planets that knew about it that we didn't do. It seems like the planets that knew, that had the populace in the know of life in space, we didn't deal with. We didn't do a lot of deals with.
Are they, so I know that you've mentioned before that Ceres, it seems like everything's like written in German. So it seems like these corporations, is it accurate to say that this Mars Corporation is it a German organization? Is it one of these like breakaway World War II? Are they Nazis? What are we talking about here? If they're Germans,
The Mars Colony Corp seemed more advanced. So when I got into so I went to the forward base. I was participated in that support soldier role, and that was canceled. That program was canceled. Then they took me to a city, a larger underground city on Mars. There was a flight on a shuttle. And when I got there, when you got off in kind of like in the shuttle bay, you walked out into, it looked like an airport area. It was welcome to Mars Colony Corp, the most advanced colony in the solar system. That they said, welcome. And it was not German. It was more of an American. It looked like American, but there was Air Force there, personnel or military personnel that looked like Air Force people, I guess. And there were civilians, people. There was a lot of civilians there, and it was very modern looking. The architecture was very pleasing to the eye. It was very aesthetic. It looked like in a modern city somewhere that was expensive. But I don't know how else to describe it. When I went to the Ceres colony, when I got off there, it was the same exact thing. They said, and I came out into a big square concrete room, a giant room full of troops, and looked at the ceiling, and it was rust. There was rust. It was old already. And they said, "Welcome to the Ceres Colony Corporation, the most advanced colony in the solar system." So it was the same thing that they were telling everybody, that they were the most advanced.
Well, you mentioned that there was signage there. I think it was on Ceres that was written in German. Was it not written in German?
Yes, at the train stations, there was German writing.
Mhm.
Yep, there was signage that was.
But it's
It was the
still there's
U-Bahn.
still English
U-Bahn.
speaking American. Who's running the show up there? Is this?
So in the beginning, for years, I didn't really determine how the translation worked, and recently, since I've learned about how the Neuralink happens, I believe that there was an implant in place. We had an implant, and it was what was doing the translating, because they turned it on and off, and it would come on in certain areas of the ship automatically. So when I was near the exit of the ship or an elevator of the ship, the translation would work. When I was at my post, it did not work. And people that spoke a different language, I had no idea what they were saying. So there was an implant, probably among all of us, that gave us translatable. When I was in the mission briefings with the flight crew, they spoke in German and they could turn it on and off. They had a pad and they would turn it on and say, "Okay, can you hear us now?" And I could hear them speaking to English. To me, it was English.
Yeah, I started going down this path because I was intrigued with the prospect of being invited up. And if you do go up, what are the conditions? You're still going to be a slave if you go up. And who are your taskmasters? Are they Nazis? Is this Iron Sky? Who's running the show?
Well, there were other species working with them in personnel and doing, career management. Basically, whatever job you did, when you started to fail at it, they would reassess you and then retrain you for a new job where you were optimal. So, and this was another species. These were long necked kind of, they looked like a gray, but they were white, the tall whites. They were the ones that were in charge of all that.
So I've got a question here from Lots. He's asking, can you ask Tony if there are any ways that people can protect themselves from mind control, V2K plus psychotronic weapons being used? Thank you for sharing your story, Tony. God bless you.
Thanks. I would not know for sure. Psionics go a long way. I know that EM fields also are have a big impact on psionics. So the Faraday fabric could work. Put it that way. It could work. the many remote viewing programs, and now I'm citing books and not so much talking about the program that I was in because we did do EM blocking. We used the EM field, EM. They would block electromagnetic waves, and that would make you more proficient at remote viewing. So the Faraday fabric is something you might think about. But a lot of the mind control, like in the media and in subliminal programming, like Super Bowl ads that they're programming you, if you're aware of it, it won't work. Excuse me, it can be less effective. It will be certainly less effective, and it may not even work altogether if you're aware that you're being programmed. Most people are not aware that they're being programmed to have a certain result, and they get emotional over things. And so I think that's the biggest problem we have right now in mind control is that most of the populace is unaware that they're being mind controlled. And once you're aware of it, once you're aware that it's all BS, then it kind of stands out. So that's on a visual version of it, but you're talking about like probably a more industrial grade of mind control. There are meditations you can do. Basically, you just got to keep your guard up, and I would look into some Faraday fabric or something like that.
Yeah, so a Faraday fabric is typically a mesh of crisscross wires that would prevent any kind of electronic.
When I was in Peru doing the very first mission I did in Peru, they would give me a drug. And this was, I was still 10, 11 years old. They would give you a drug and I would go near death and they could ask me questions and it was like channeling and they were getting accurate information. And the first time I did it, the information was gibberish. It was garbled. They had no idea. So, and it was on an airplane. I was on an old C-46 Commando airplane. We were flying out of Peru to Colombia doing shipments of drugs. And the first mission, they thought, you don't even work. We're going to get rid of you. And they contacted the people that they bought me from or leased me from. And they sent down a silver mesh blanket. A blanket. I remember that because it was a blanket. It was made out of silver. They said, wow, this had to be expensive. And he wrapped me up in it and did the same thing, put an IV in my arm, and then he wrapped me in the silver mesh blanket and put me under, gave me the drug. And when I woke up, the attitude, everything was changed. It worked. Whatever they did, whatever he wanted to channel, it worked. And he was channeling information that was, totally mind blowing to him. So that is this. And the reason is they said that the instruments of the plane gave off EM field that may have interfered.
Okay. Yeah. Was it was this a fine mesh, a very fine mesh?
Yes. Yeah. And he put it, the first time he did it, it was easy. And he said it was actually easy to rip that, and he put it on me and then put a blanket over me. And eventually his mother sewed it into 2 blankets so that it was like a real blanket. Like she sewed it in between a couple blankets so that it was just a blanket he could throw over me.
Wow.
And it was cold on the plane anyway, so it worked out because it was pretty cold on it in the back there usually. And that became the standard method for that. I did that for 2 summers, a couple of years, from 11 till about 13 years old during that time that I was taken. That was my job.
Are you remote?
About once a month.
Are you remote viewing these days? Do you ever engage in any kind of remote viewing sessions? Or?
So dealing with doing the research, trying to prove my account, trying to prove my case, doing the research has led me to actually rediscover a lot of the things that I knew. And I have been able to go into some higher focus states and actually interact. And there have been other people, I've met some very talented psychic people, which it's hard to say. It's easy to say now, but back when I started in 2015, I knew always, there's psychic people out there, but I didn't know that they were that good until I met them. I've met people in Australia. They had me down there, and I met on my show. My co-host is a very talented medium, and there's a lot of psychic. And then if you go to any conference, you're going to meet some people that have some psychic ability. They're the ones that like going to conferences, and people are very proficient at it. So I've been able to rediscover a lot of techniques that helped, and I've tried them, and they work. But maybe for the purpose of, because I have a bad taste in my mouth left over from the whole 20 years.
Sure.
I don't really care to really care to develop it. I really don't. I think I had enough of the other side, and I'd like to live in this world as best I can. I still haven't figured out this world. But
Fair
there
enough.
are some techniques you can manipulate your own life by going into higher focus states and getting into the setting an intention, solving a problem, setting something, and you can have great results in your life. But there is pushback too. So
Mhm.
it's an art. There's an art to it. The government militarized it. I've rediscovered a lot of the information on that. The CIA docs. In fact, this is a shameless plug, Walter. But on my show, Talks with Tony on Patreon, I'm doing a 5-part series. I just filmed part 2 this week on this subject and how to do it for people because I get asked a lot. I get asked it a lot. Like, so what do I do? I feel I have these abilities. What can I do to make them better? What else can I do? Can you give me some information? And so I'm doing a 5-part series and explaining that so that people can I can
Huh.
go watch those episodes
Huh.
and go there.
So
But hey,
do one of those parts cover a silver mesh blanket per se?
yeah, it's going to be probably part 4.
Really?
We're going to go into that. Yeah. Well, so we did the last week. We did the science behind it. So I explained the science. There's a lot of
Wow.
science on my website on TonyRodrigues.com. There's a few documents you can read that are down. I think they're marked under must reads or like readable resources. Stalking the Wild Pendulum. That PDF is available there. And there's a
Hmm.
CIA document, the declassified CIA document on my website. You can download those and read those, and that's actually a great start. And then there's other things. There's self-guided meditations that we're going to be going into. The Moreau Institute, binaural. So
Yep. Yep.
ETs use binaural ability too. So when I went to school on Mars, when I was being trained to do my job, the first 6 minutes of class, I listened to binaural tones, and that what that did is it aligned your brain so that you could learn better. So it was a learning tool, and so this is a real technology that's going to stay into the future with us. Binaural sounds to get into a meditative state or a state of mind,
Right.
change your state to relax, to go into an astral state of mind, or into a studying kind of learning state of mind. These work.
Right. There are
These are
different
things that
ranges,
work.
different frequencies, brain states that you can attune your brain to binaural beats. Viewers of my channel,
Absolutely.
yeah, viewers of my channel have seen me interview John Vivanco, who's a psychic spy, and he talks all about. He teaches remote viewing. In fact, I took a 3-day
That
course,
stuff. Yes, and it works.
and
It
yep,
works. It'd be one thing if it didn't work, but it does.
yep. All right. So we have a question here.
Uh,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, no, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go, dude. I can wait. What do you got?
Oh no, go ahead with the no,
Okay,
go ahead
okay,
with the
so you're ready. All
question.
right, so I
I
just I didn't
was
want to cut you off. So I have another question here because I tend to go fast too. Murr asks, he says that he has a friend from Vegas that has disappeared in March with no trace. Is it possible he was abducted? And is it possible to find out? What are your thoughts on that?
of course it's possible he was abducted if he just disappeared without a trace. I don't have that kind of clearance. I don't know who would have that kind of clearance to find out if I would look at the people around him in his life, where he was involved with military people, or what kind of things he was doing in his spare time. I would try to just get together a sequence of events led up, maybe 6 months prior or a year prior, and see if that had anything to do. It could be a random instance. It could be something of purpose. There's no telling. Some people get taken and don't come back, and that's a reality. And what causes it, I don't know, because they don't come back. And you know, it's a shame. I feel for you for that person, but I don't have any real insights in that at all.
All right, thanks for having a go with that. We have in the news the David Fravor Tic Tac and a report that's coming out here real soon that's been put off. What are your thoughts on what's going to happen in the wake of this governmental report?
I like how they think that. So they've stated on many news sources. They stated that this is I. They're like, well, we don't know, but it can't be the U.S. We've ruled that out for sure. It can't be one of our black programs. We know for sure. They keep saying it over and over again. They say it might be the Chinese who have been behind us technologically the whole time, and all their tech is copied from us. Their stealth plane is copied from us. Their tanks are copies of our copies. Like they come whenever we have a new military thing. They're first people in the front row of the show. And then they had the geometries in their military the following year. But suddenly they're have anti-grav craft that are doing 20,000 miles an hour into the water. There's no way that they could rule out black projects this early on, black programs. There's just no way. Even the declassified report was delivered today, and we're going to see a very, very watered down version of that watered down report. It'll be interesting, but I'm pretty sure we're going to get a pack of lies. There's a lot of history of military craft, and there's a lot of real credible witnesses that say that both the Air Force, the Army, and the Navy all along have operational craft that are anti-grav, that are in several shapes, triangles, discs, and rectangles, that they are using, and that the Russians have round ones, and probably the Chinese. Like I said, there are 5 or 6 fleets that are born from the Earth here. There's a United Nations space fleet. There's a Chinese Asian space fleet. There's the Solar Warden program is basically Canada, European nations, and the Americans. And there's the German fleet. So there are several others. I don't know them all. But that report is definitely going to be all about them. And for them to say, there's already speculation that the report says, well, they're not aliens. We don't know what they are, but they're not a threat either, and they're not us. So for them to say that, and those are some pretty big eliminations right out of the gate. There's no way that a craft that you don't know, at its very core, a craft that can outperform everything in your military, that it operates on a different flight medium that we know about, something that's a completely different flight medium than science is aware of.
No control
And that
surfaces,
we have,
no propulsion that's evident.
yeah. No trails. It goes to Mach 30 without leaving a trail, and no sound, no sonic boom. So these are sciences. This is a technology that we don't have any access to. We don't have access to who's flying it. We don't have any kind of contact with them. They're buzzing our military ships. So if anybody to suggest that that's not a national security threat is lying. There's just a bold lie, because just the unknown is a threat. Like going into your basement in the dark after hearing a noise, there's a threat. And so at its core, even though there's probably not, you turn the lights on, it's going to be a cricket or something, who knows? But for them to suggest that there's no threat where we have this huge gap in performance, tech, is just a horrible lie. And it's programming that people are not aware that they're being programmed. They're trying to program you like distraction. Look over here. And the report, I think, is itself a big distraction. Look over here. Don't look at this, because we've got a lot going on politically in the nation right now. A lot of big changes are going on. It seems like the people that were very bold 6 months ago and invoking social change and legal social change and doing things around the nation are not so bold right now. The big tech that is silencing everybody, a lot of those people are not that bold at the moment. So there's big things going on. We just had the McAfee death is very shrouded in mystery, and that he was involved in early in his career, he was involved in some very high tech things with Lockheed Martin, with Xerox, and Microsoft, on and on and on with the McAfee. And then he revealed in some interviews that his McAfee thing, that he was able to load spyware and see everybody's computer. So if the McAfee antivirus was preloaded in Windows all along, was spying on everybody all along, he has to have some pretty big weight in the government and in the secret government. And so these things are all taking place this week. This is this week. And we're getting reports that are just absolutely absurd for them to speculate. What is it? Is it tomorrow? Or is it next week that it's next week that they delayed the report. So the classified report delivered to Congress today, the public report should be out next week if they don't postpone it again.
Congress today, right? I saw that in your post today on Facebook about Friday.
Yeah.
So, I don't have a whole lot I'm not holding my breath on anything coming out of that. It's going to be earth shattering. I don't think it's going to be anything more than has already been leaked to the New York Times and other rags out there. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in them really being able to say any more. The question is, Tony, what do you think? I mean, does the Pentagon really know? I mean, are they aware of
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
of the secret space program, for example, and all
Oh,
this
yeah.
advanced technology? They are aware.
Oh, yeah. So what? Um, I hate the name drop and advertise for other people, but Dr. Michael Sella sent me a copy of his recent book, Space Force. The Space Force, our Star Trek future.
Sure.
This is a new book, and he sent it to me because I'm in it. He references
Mm-hmm.
me on a couple pages, and so yeah, I'm not a big reader. I'm really kind of not not a very academic guy. And so I'm not a big reader, so I started reading it. And there's a lot of facts in there that explain the relationship inside the Pentagon with the secret space program, with the Air Force. And they all have their own kind of secret space program, but just at much different levels of tech, much different levels of knowledge as well. There's a need to know basis that's happened. And our military is so compartmentalized that it's a crapshoot on what they know. So people that literally in the Pentagon, people that have an office right across the hall from each other, one guy knows about life, on another galaxy. He knows what's going on Ceres Colony. The guy across the hall doesn't think there's aliens exist and that there's no space bases. You know what I'm saying? Like they're that close to each other in their working space, people of that knowledge. And in our life too, because believe me, there are people that you have all met, everybody watching this, there are people that you've all met in your life that went through a 20 and back like me and have their memories, that went through it in an official capacity and know exactly what they're talking about. And if you ever get into a really deep conversation with over a couple drinks, you may meet one. But a lot of people got their memories, but the reason they don't come forward is because they also got a paycheck. And if they do get caught speaking about it, they got to forfeit that money and may go to jail. So that guarantees silence.
Right.
There are a lot of people walking around like that.
Yeah, I understand that compartmentalization, how that all works.
I think that the Pentagon report, like the classified, you got to think that just is a light bulb just went off just now. So you got to think about that situation of in the Pentagon, across the hall from each other. Now the classified report is out. That means that the classified report is bringing people that have access to classified information up to speed. That's a titanic development just inside the military community. So now if you had 10% of the people that were aware of the secret space program and 90% of the people laughing because it was a conspiracy theory, now they're being brought into the know and they can start preparing for the public report. That's not going to happen. Let's get one thing straight. The public report next week is not going to be anything but a pack of lies glazed over with a pack of vague sentiments, a couple videos and a few vague facts with a pack of lies glazed over, and they're going to kick the can down the road. This is going to happen. It's government. But inside the government, we may see some really big changes of the way things go. The other thing that I found out that was very interesting in that book is that the CIA, which from my perspective, the Germans on Ceres Colony, they said that they controlled the world through the intelligence organizations. That was their thing. We were picking up cargo at Diego Garcia, military cargo. At one point we modified an LCAC, a huge hovercraft. If you're familiar with those, an LCAC.
I'm not familiar with the nomenclature, but I've seen
It's a troop transport hovercraft that the Marine Corps uses.
I've seen, yeah, right out here off the coast in San Diego.
So they modified one to be narrower. They cut like 10 feet out of the middle of it.
Sure.
They down the center, and they had to put it back together. It was a lot of work, so they would fit on our ship. So it would fit in our main cargo bay. We came and got one, and it was millions of dollars. And so we went back. There were several cargo loads, and there was a tab that was running. There were two American officers at Diego Garcia that were aware that they would bring cargo out to us, and we would load cargo on the ship and fly away in the middle of the night, on occasion, under appointment. One time, the cargo engineer from the sea deck, well, the guy, he was the one that was supposed to go down the lift and sign for, there was a manifest that they gave us on a clipboard, like a piece of paper, the manifest, and there was a signature involved. So to say the cargo got delivered, basically, so that to prove that the cargo didn't get stolen by somebody else on its way to the ship. One day he was sick and he was or injured, or I forget exactly what happened to him. So they sent me down. And when they said, just sign it. I said, I don't have a signature. I had a number at the time. And they said, just make a mark, just sign a squiggly line. It doesn't matter. Just sign it. It doesn't matter. No one cares. And this is an officer that I was unaware. I really didn't work with him that much. So he was just telling me this. I said, okay. And I was kind of scared, but I went down and did it. And the American officer said, look, you guys are getting a big tab. You're getting up to, you're up to like $2.5 million that you owe. You guys need to take care of this. They wanted me to remind you of that. You guys, your tab. So I said, okay, I'll let them know. And I went back up the lift and we flew back to Ceres. The following morning at the mission briefing for the next day, at the end of the, halfway through the mission, they said, does anybody have anything to add? And I raised my hand and I said, they said we're getting behind we owe them money. And he wanted me to let you guys know. And the entire flight crew, all the German people, cried laughing. They laughed and they were crying laughing about that. Mm-hmm. Because they don't pay a dime, because it's the black budget. That's what I mean. They are other colonies. The CIA has its own space fleet, and they are trading with other colonies, and the goods that they take from the Earth to go and trade are covered under the black budget. In the book, Space Force, the official, so he's uncovered that. There's a story about it because they restructured the CIA in 2005. In the book, the official CIA budget is like $85 billion or $88 billion annually. And what they found was when they restructured it, they got people together in the NRO office, and they got together with accounting because nobody knew how much money they had. And the number that the CIA is actually spending is 1.1 trillion a year, even though the military budget for the United States is only 700 billion. So the CIA that only has 21,000 employees is spending almost twice, well, a good deal, a third more than all of the military, the United States, the most powerful military on earth, all of that money yearly, the CIA is spending more of that. That's because crazy. It's going into space, because they have their own space fleet. They have access to anti-grav. They've set up outposts throughout the solar system, and they're trading with ETs, and that's where the money's going. And that's where we're at. So how do you include that into the report? That's the report. So we're seeing craft that they go, well, they're us. We don't know if they're us or the military or whatever. But they are ETs. B, they are us. You're seeing craft that do all different things, and they're the Germans.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it here first. There's your disclosure. That's crazy.
Well, we'll see how it plays out.
No, the money is just insane.
Yeah, to get your head around what a company with 20,000 employees could do with $1.1 trillion, not just one time, but annually. Mm-hmm. That's annual. So 11 trillion in a decade, $11 trillion per decade. That this small organization that's only responsible for international intelligence, supposedly for Congress and for the military, has more money than most of the world.
Well, let's look at it this way then. You've got what was this? The U.S. Navy on Diego Garcia requesting to be paid $2 million or whatever it is. There's got to be something on the book somewhere that shows a deficit of $2 million or whatever it is. Where
I'm sure there's a creative accounting thing that's a black project. Mm-hmm. And years ago, when I first came out with my testimony, I talked about Diego Garcia, and the reason I always talk about how I remembered it because we made a joke about the name of it on the ship, and when we were flying, we said, "Where's the next stop?" We would make several stops. Where's the next stop? Because we're kind of overloaded with cargo. So we're going to Diego Garcia. Somebody would say, and we go, "Oh, you mean the American base with the Italian first name and the Spanish last name in the Indian Ocean?" Yes. And then we would add on to that and go, yeah, we're going to go and we're going to pick up some Russian cargo off a Chinese boat at an American base with an Italian first name and a Spanish second name in the Indian Ocean for some Germans. Right. And guys would just build it out. It went on and on and on. We did it. We got a laugh out of it.
Yeah, that's what we did. A running gag.
Yeah, it was our gag because, we were guys at work. That's what you do. But when I did that, somebody came forward on one of the videos and commented and said, I'm calling bullshit, Tony. There's no way that we would never had a curfew on Diego Garcia. I was stationed there for 4 years and we never had a curfew in the 90s. We never had to be locked up. And I was told that while we were there, while our ship was there, everybody was locked into their, the staff, the people that were the personnel that were stationed there, they were not able to leave their quarters. And this is like 3, 4 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
He said, no, that never happened. Somebody commented. And then a few months later, somebody saw that and then there was actually an article that it's commonplace that Diego Garcia locks down in the middle of the night all the time, 3, 4 nights a week. And I forget where the article was. It was like Popular Mechanics or something. It was a, pretty good source that said that. And I went and posted it back to that person in that thread, and I never got a comment back out of it. So it was a cover up, is what I think it was. It was somebody trying to cover that up. But it was true. That is a factual circumstance that they do lock down Diego Garcia often. So
Yeah, I got a quip here from Mark Hovespain. He goes, ET takes cash and lots of it apparently.
information. Well, remember, your consciousness is currency. So you are a very, very efficient worker, all of us. I said, people have said, why don't they do robots? Why would they take you to be a slave? Why, there were guys in mining is actually a lot of the workforce is into mining into planetoids. Mining is a big deal, and that's how they can make space to build caverns. So, and they do a lot of the mining that's pretty high tech, and a lot of it is backbreaking work. And there's a lot of the slave labor does that. So somebody said, well, bullshit, because why wouldn't they just make a robot for that? And the reason is, if and I covered this in a talk years ago, that all of the energy, the electricity that you use, if you put it in energy, you, Walter, or anybody else listening, all of the energy you used last year, if I put it in a battery form, it would power one light bulb, a 100-watt light or a 60-watt light bulb for one 24-hour period. So a light bulb left on for 24 hours is all of the electricity that you expended last year. And you did a whole lot of things in 1 year. Believe me, one person can get a lot done on that much energy. That's how energy efficient people are. For one. For two, if you build a robot that drills into a moon, when it's done, that's it. A person can turn around and start building, and then clean and maintain, and then go work on ships. You can do many, many things. We're very quickly programmable. We heal, and we can be programmed, mind controlled a lot more easily than we'd like to believe. So we are the ideal worker. And when you talk about just taking people that are currency, and if you're another species, you don't really have a lot of empathy for that. You got to think if what we do, with before the industrial age, we were, it was a donkey plowing the field. We had no problem with that. I'm sure the donkey didn't enjoy what it was doing, but it was a consciousness. It was self-aware, and it was alive and had other things it would rather do, but it was forced to do our labor. And we're kind of in those shoes for some other organizations, the Germans, for one, the Draco group, the Orion group. They are using people. They see us as lesser than them, the same way we see animals, and they use us for labor, and we're very good at it. We're very good at for labor. So consciousness is the currency. The other thing that the Ceres colony, our missions was not to boldly go. Our mission statement was not to boldly go where no one's gone before. It was to trade goods for technology or technology for technology. Our mission statement was to acquire technology, pretty much by any means necessary. So they were trying to go with raw material, like something that another race couldn't get, and acquire their tech, something that they did, a form of tech. Well, teach us how to do something was the deal. Or trade technology for technology. They were trying to get one leg up on the other colonies in the solar system. All of the colonies are competing for a technological ladder. And that was our goal, was to do whatever we could, trade whatever it took, find an advanced race, interact with it, offer it a deal, see what it needed, provide it, and get technology so that we could become that advanced. And that was their mission statement, and they did it for a very long. They've been at it for a long time.
Well, it
And that's
seems
pretty much what the CIA is doing, and that's what everybody's doing. That's the secret. That's what's behind the scenes. They're trying to upgrade technology faster than everybody else. It's been fragmented into so many different programs. They're competing with each other. and they don't want us to join because once the entire world gets in on the act, we're gonna just have numbers on them.
So it seems for them, cash is really irrelevant. I mean,
There's no money, right? Well,
but
okay. The the Ceres colony did have money. There was a money system in place, but there were species that would come and visit that did not use money, and they were given like a pass that gave them free everything. You know, it was they weren't very wasteful either. It's not like they had like an unlimited pass because they didn't use money where they came from, and they were there under supposedly invitation.
mhm.
But they had like a free and endless credit line. But people that come from those kind of societies aren't frivolous anyway. There's just no, money thing is a different thing. But the people, the citizens that lived there, I actually had a small paycheck,
Okay, I
and
was
the
about to
citizens
ask
that
you
lived
about
there
that. How they
had a money system.
okay. Was it U.S. dollars or was it something script?
They called them francs. They called
Okay.
them francs, and there was facial recognition, so you could get a bank account and put your money in a bank account, and you could pay $5 a month to join the facial recognition system, and probably on the implant that worked with it. But basically, all you had to do was look at the screen. The machines had telepathic interaction as well. When you talk about purchasing like a train ticket,
Hmm.
you could just look at the screen and yes, that one. I mean, A, and then go there down. It would go down and go. I'm going to this stop. Eisenwaffen or whatever. I'm going to that stop. Boom. Day pass. Yes. Do you take this out of your account? Yes. Boom. And it would happen
Done.
just like that.
Mhm.
It was all automated, and there was no card. There was none of that. But I didn't want to pay for that because I only got like 20 francs a week. And so I carried cash. There was a cash. It was a rubbery, plasticky, rubbery, and their money had pictures of like the 30 Years War in the 1600s, pictures of battles with cannons and guys on horses with swords. That was the pictures that were on their money.
I've got a couple questions here I want to run past you real quick. The first one's from Vicky Berger, and the other one's going to be from Free Range Brain again. So Vicky's got a bit of an experience here. She shares with us and has a question. She says, some entity is communicating with me telepathically when my eyes are closed. It's all visual. I am seeing words scrolling and several types of short videos. Why would an EBE, extraterrestrial biological entity, have interest in me? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, because you're listening. Not everybody's listening, right? So that would be my first inclination. The other thing I would tell you is you need to write these down, and they'll take shape over time. How long has it been going on? How much detail do you get? And you definitely need to make a log when you do this, and you need to purposely set time apart and sit down and try to invoke this and listen and see what's trying to come through. The other thing is don't take it as verbatim. So if they tell you to sell the house and put all the money on black, go to the casino and put it on black 32, please don't do that. But you need to construct what it is when people that are dealing with this kind of contact, with a vague contact, it takes shape over time because we don't know the source. We don't know where the source, or frankly, when the source is. It could be somebody in the future sending messages back. It could be anything. So these things, there has to be a bulk of evidence. Excuse me, evidence is the wrong word. There has to be a bulk amount of information for you to extract common denominators to see what in the heck is going on. So every little thing you need to and when you do write down what you do, you need to have the date, because we're talking about people, telepathic contact leaves time space. And so it can be garbled, it can be backwards, it can be from the future, the past, and the date of it. And there could be a cycle that they only can communicate with you in June. For instance, I'm trying to be quick about this, but this is a long conversation to have. I can talk with people for weeks before we get to the bottom of things like this. But common denominators will appear. You want to log when and what you're remembering, what's going on. Keep track of everything, things you eat, how much sleep you got, what's going on that day. I've I've been able to find people and get into star charts and see the orbits of planets that line up every time they get a message. So there are a lot of things there are a lot of variables here when you're with what little information I got. So it could be something mental, right? It could be something else. Let's call it what it is. It could be something, you know what I mean? It could be medical. You could need a medicine. I don't know. I just don't know. There's a lot to it. If it does happen a lot, I will say that. I will say that a lot of people have had the same experience. And everybody that I've talked to like that I've worked with, when you start digging into family history, relationships, location, where they're at, some people are right next to a military base, on and on and on. There are other things you need to look at in your life. You need to document and just get a notepad or make an email and keep sending it to yourself kind of thing and write down what you can. And a pattern will emerge and it'll 9 times out of 10, we glean some really good information out of keeping track of a timeline.
Great response, Tony. Thank you for sharing. You've been very
Another
generous.
shameless plug.
Go for it.
Another
Yeah,
shameless
go.
plug is I have the memory course available on my website. It's $40.
There you go,
Pays
Vicky.
for the website.
Hey, the prices are reasonable too. I mean, if you take a look at the services that a lot of
I'm
these-
not trying to get rich. I'm just trying to perpetuate the information. That's all. With the Patreon channel that I have, the show is $5 a month. You can pay $5 one time, binge them all. We've been at it a year. There's over 30 episodes. But the reason there's a $5 paywall is so that because I'm coming up on 200 interviews in 6 years, and half of them are not out there anymore. They've been scrubbed. So a lot of the guys know the censorship is on. There are things we can't say on this, or his show will get taken down. And that's the sad reality of today. So I had to put a paywall to stop the random troll from going in there and reporting everything, or just to try to withstand some censorship. So that's why that's there. I'm not trying to do this as a career. It's not that kind of money anyway. I mean, it does. I don't make that kind of money from the show or anything. It's not big money.
Yeah, icing on the cake, as it were. All right, so Free Range Brain again asks, let's see what we got here. Is there a secret/alternative chief of staff at the Pentagon fully aware of the full agenda?
Absolutely. There is absolutely. Okay. That's what I meant earlier when I said that there are people that you've passed on the street that are aware of everything. The secret space program takes people, and there are a lot of people that don't get their memories erased. They come back with full knowledge, and they know each other, and they have decent jobs. They work for companies, and then they get placement for training because these people are valuable. So people that go up there and do grunt work don't really, and then let's say they worked on vehicles their whole time. When they come back, they get the Marine Corps version. The soldiers tend to keep their memories because it's with the grain mental programming. Their programming is kind of like encouraging. So they encourage them saying, you're going to keep your memories, so this is actually a bonus of the program that you're going to remember the 20 years. You're going to be a much smarter person when you go back. But there are people with valuable skills that they learn up there, people that can work on important things, complicated things, people that can do software coding, for instance. And so why erase his memories when you can just pay him when he gets back? We'll just pay the hell out of him and ensure, like I said, imagine paying somebody $500,000 at the end of their service. And then if they talk about it, say, not only do you get jail time, but you owe me $500,000 back. I'm going to take all your stuff. Odds are that person's going to be very silent about their time. It's not going to come up at a cocktail party that they were in the space program. So there are a lot of people like that. So that means that in the Pentagon, there are a great deal. And there are a lot of people you can see commenting on. When I see public speakers, you can see their behavior is different in public. People that are working in the headlines, I look at them, I go, I know they were involved in the program, because you can just tell. You can just tell by the way their career path goes, the things they know. They've brushed elbows with people. They're aware of the program.
Yeah, grabbing my mouse here to unmute myself. Okay, I've got a question here.
Take your time.
Yeah. This is all good. Really appreciate this. So we've got Lots in here asking another question. He wants to know about memory, your memory wipe experience. Let's see, what does he say? Will you please ask Tony to please speak about his memory wipe experience, also about what your memories be used for if they are taken? What can your memories be used for if they are taken? So one, tell us about your experience having your memory wiped, and if the memories are taken, what are they used for?
You mean like taken out of your head?
Yeah,
used for
I
something.
think there's probably a bit of a misunderstanding about the memory wipe.
Yeah, I don't think that's. I'm unaware of anything that they would use your memories for. The the erasing experience was actually very protracted. It wasn't a fast thing. It was over time. There were days. It was several days, 5, 6 days of every day going in and getting 2 or 3 treatments of um, basically like industrial strength hypnosis. They would do a surgery. There would be sometimes they would give me drugs. Sometimes they wouldn't. If you've ever been to an arcade and you've seen the big arcade games that you can sit inside, you open and there's shooters in there. They got the big screen and you can sit down. There were booths like that, and some of them were not that big. Some of them were a shroud. It was a chair with a big screen and its own speakers, and they would give you drugs, and it was just lock your head in position to where you had to watch it, and it was industrial strength hypnosis basically, or subliminal programming. They would flash, you know, unsettling movies and things over and over again and under the influence of certain drugs. And I think that they would put drugs in certain regions of your brain so that they would attack those areas. So there's some drug technology behind it. But and they kept doing that over and over again and then they would test you. And then after that was done, they would test me. And the tests were weird. It wasn't like they asked you a question, what do you remember now? Sometimes it was like that, but there were other tests that were just, identify this as, they'd show you a circle and say, identify that. And they would know if it worked or not. So I was very combative during the process. I was lippy, and I did not want to forget my service. I wanted very much to remember, and I fought them on the process. And I was like a smartass about it. But it worked. So there's a lot of things that worked. And at the end, when I woke up, so then I went through that program, and then they put you where you sit still. They on a table, and they erected a little like a foam barrier around you, and they gave you shots that would um, paralyze your muscles. And I was conscious and sat there and could go to sleep and wake up, and I was being fed through a tube, but I couldn't move. And they said, if you can help it, don't move. Don't try to move because you can get injured during the process. You can get severe back spinal injury if you move during this process. So please don't move is what they told me. But every day it was like shots of needles. Every morning they would come with needles and give shots all through your muscles. They'd hit all your muscles. And that went on. It felt like weeks. I mean, I lost track of the time, but it felt like a very long time. At the end of that, they wheeled me on a gurney. They took down I thought, okay, we're over. This is great. They took down the foam barrier around me, and they wheeled me into a machine, and it felt like I got incinerated. It felt like there were bright pink lights and light that came on, and it felt like golf ball sized pain throughout my body in certain places, like effervescent, and it felt like I got incinerated. And the whole thing lit up, and I lost consciousness, and I woke up again in my 10-year-old body. And from that point on, I was back to my 10-year-old body, and I did not have memories of my time on Ceres or Seattle. None of those memories were back. None of those memories were there at that time. I was sitting on a table with a bunch of ETs, a tall white, a couple of grays, and a couple reptilians in a room with lights on. And I had all my memories back of my mom and dad and where I was from. I had all those memories back of being a 10-year-old kid again. I was right back to that. That's where I woke up after that. And they asked me, where did you just come from? And I said, well, you guys took me from my house. And they laughed. They said, see, he thought he was going to remember. Like they challenged it. And they had a laugh about it, and I was livid. It made me mad, and I kind of threw a tantrum about it. But that was the process. That's what I remember of the process. And after that, they saw that I did remember in the future. They had chronovision, so they had the ability to see probable futures from me at that point. And they saw in the future that most of my probable futures that I did retain memories, that I got my memories back. And they put me through another round of programming. And I went through a contact with some ET being, more like a Skype call with a Draco, and I had the visions that Jason Rice explained from when troops dropped off people to the Draco, how they implant graphic imaging into your head of first person of people being murdered. It was the same thing. They were showing me that, and it put me in a state of shock, and they kept trying to program me to keep forgetting. God, I'm getting a headache thinking about it. But anyhow, that was basically the very end, you know. And then at the end of that point, they gave up on it. They were gonna give me surgery. They took me to surgery. They were gonna give me a lobotomy. I was gonna go back and be crippled mentally ever after. And when I got there for the surgery, they could not find me in the record. I was not in the system. My name was not in the system. There was no record of me. And they said, well, if he's not in there, we can't do surgery. Just put him back. We can't get in trouble for it if he's not in the system. So just put him back. The reptile that was walking me around the security, my escort, said, this is your lucky day. And he walked me down to a portal room. And I got portaled back into my bed and woke up the next morning in 1982.
How long did it take you to recover your memories? I mean, at what point did they start coming back to you after all of this?
They were vague. A week or two later, the first 30 minutes of being taken, I never forgot. The next day, I forgot them, you know, for that window of days where, you know, like I was still kind of very disoriented. But when I kind of got my bearings, I remembered the abduction. I always remembered it. And that led me on to like read the Bible and look for ETs. I always knew there was a gray and a reptile, and you know, at 10 years old. So it was after that, but it's not something that I talked about. I talked about it a little bit, you know, like at the end of high school and then my 20s. You know, after I had a few drinks, I would talk to people about being abducted, but I didn't really know what I was talking about. The big assembly of memories happened in May of 2015. It all hit me at once, and I went, "Oh my God!" The memories happened like throughout my life, and I would get flashes back, like flying over the Ceres geyser. I would remember that, and it wasn't a dream because I could remember everything. I remembered a career. It was like a different personality. And I thought, when could I have done that? You know, so I just shuffled it off and said it was just a vivid dream. But once I realized that it did happen, that there was temporal interference, that you could live and be put back. Once I got my head around that fact, I went, oh my God, that's what happened. And then all the memories came, you know, began to come. I'm still remembering, really.
Right.
It's a lifelong thing.
Right. And you put it all.
People that it's going to be for the rest of my life that I remember things, because 20 years is a lot. Nobody can recall 20 years and write it down right now.
Sure.
You know, I don't care how smart you are. You can't just write down everything that happened in the last 20 years. It's too much.
Not unless you're doing it as you go. Who wants to do that? It's called a journal. So is anybody trying to shut you down? It seems like they tried to stop you twice, you know, from remembering. Now here we are forward a number of years. I mean, have there been any other attempts to wipe your memories, or has there been any overt acts to shut you down?
I was abducted in 2015 and interrogated by an Air Force group, by a space program, on a space program. I was taken on a ship and I was drugged and repeatedly asked the same questions. I was shown images and they kept asking me, and I was very cooperative. I said, you know, I told them everything I knew at the time. And they just kept asking me the same questions and repeating. And I woke up in my bed the next morning and I kind of remembered what happened, but, you know, I don't know. They just interrogated me. They didn't try to wipe my memories or anything.
Did they drug you to get you there and back, or how'd that all work out?
I don't know, but they were drugging me. They would give me drugs that would make me chatty. You know, they were giving me, and it would, where I was taken. They told me at the end, like, let's get you. Okay, you're all set. We're taking you home. You can go to bed now. It's been 18 hours, and we're going to take you to bed. And I just fell asleep, and I woke up in my bed. But they were giving me shots every couple hours because it would wear off. And I remember when they would give me a shot that I would become very talkative. Not that I'm not talkative already, right?
Like, I didn't think about that. Like, Tony needs a shot to talk.
But as far as that, I've had a few other things, but I think that I'm kind of, I like to think that I'm not that big of an impact for them. You know, like I said, I've withheld a lot of names, a lot of information that would be damaging to people that are alive right now. Publicly, I don't talk about. And, I get a lot of speculation. So there's a lot of people that I get a lot of trolls and things.
Yeah.
So there is deniability. So I haven't had any, knock on wood, I haven't had any real cognitive things. I'll tell you one thing that happens is I get my phone and my computer hacked monthly. I got to reset my phone. I've been through 3 or 4 phones. People are very good at hacking nowadays. And so and as a result, I've had to get good at defending myself, and I'm not. I still get hacked. People hack. It's very good. People are very good at it. And so I am somebody that gets my privacy invaded quite often. And a lot of the interviews I do in the first couple years, and not so much lately, but in the first few years, pretty much every interview I did had some kind of electrical problem. There
Interesting.
were a lot of problems. Yeah, it was very common in the beginning.
Yeah, I've had situations like that. Yeah. So let me ask you this. Colin Broadhead asks, this is going back to when we're discussing the money thing. Aside from the economics of robots versus humans, do the secret space programs feel that artificial intelligence represents an existential threat?
Yes, and okay, so a lot of the real cutting edge stuff I just didn't have contact with. I just didn't have access to. I did not have my own computer, or I didn't have a cell phone. Excuse me. They called it something else. It's funny. They had a name for it. It's on the tip of my tongue. But I didn't have access to that. Um, I just had second and third person conversations is how I knew about anything. AI was something that they were excited about, that they wanted to use to get one up on other colonies. Also, the Draco had a very advanced AI that they kept to themselves, and they also had very advanced nanotechnology that the Germans wanted, but it was reserved solely for the reptilians. They have their own, I guess, like a very highly advanced nanobot that they had. But AI was something that was also terrifying to them. It was very respected as a devastating weapon that they would, it was like too hot to hold kind of thing. So I didn't come in contact personally on Ceres Colony with any AI, put it that way.
Cool.
Yeah, if that's an
That's
answer.
a great answer, Tony. Perfect. I've got a question here from Philip Gillenwater asks, have you looked up anyone you met in the SSP? If so, did they remember you too?
A lot of people, it's funny. So I get it a lot that people are like, "It was me. Do you remember me? It was me." And I go, "I don't remember you. I'm sorry. You did not ring a bell." Well, the other thing is, a lot of people go, "Don't you remember me?" And I go and I'm like, "Sure. Oh well, let me take a look." And I look at their Facebook profile, and it's like 3 pictures. I'm like, "How could I need?" There are hundreds of hours of watching me on video, and then people introduce themselves, and there's like one picture of them standing in the distance in a crowd of people. So it's like I can't, even if I did know them, I still wouldn't recognize them. A lot of people don't provide me with great pictures or even want to video chat with me if they were. But I have met people that I knew up there, and I have uh, spoken freely with some of them, and people that don't. There are people that I knew up there very good, very close that I've found, and they don't have their memories, and I do. And so it's kind of not cool for me to tell them. Uh, some people, it was like the cat was out of the bag, and they said, "Do you remember me?" And I say yes, and I say, "Do you remember me?" And they say no, and I say, I knew you," and I've had that experience. There are other people. There was a person that I knew that I found, and I told everything, and it was very damaging to them.
Ooh.
And it was the wrong thing to do. And as a result, I wouldn't do that again. So if I did, so for instance, hypothetically, Walter, if I knew you up there and you were a co-worker of mine on the ship, I wouldn't volunteer I might drop some hints for you. I'd leave breadcrumbs just in case to give you the option, but I would not outright tell you because it's a very damaging
Yeah, the
thing
way that
for somebody to be.
so for that situation, you and I have kind of discussed this briefly before, but you haven't gone down that road. But the way that I think on in this regard is, if I'm going, if that's the thing that I want to learn, I want to be of my own knowing. I would want to I would want to
Absolutely.
go into like a regression therapist of somebody who I trust and who's really good at this, and then I'd be able to assess it on my own, on
You'd have to
what the
have
truth is.
a lot of people went through so there were people I knew up there that did not want to remember. They said, when I go back and they delete my memory, I'm gonna be happy about it. I don't want to remember any of this. I hate it up here.
Hmm.
There were a lot of, so that in respect for that person. So when you talk about somebody that's in a 20 year, it's actually two people, because they took on an entirely different set of information that led them to be a different person, to make different decisions. They were a different, slightly different person than what you are now because of the environment. So that person needs respect. If they don't want to be remembered, if they didn't want to recall that, that needs to be respected. And that's the case in a lot of memory blocks with people that don't remember. You can want to remember all day long because you do have memories, keystone memories, flashes of memories. You may want to know the story more than that, but that person may not want you to know.
It's
Your subconscious, your higher self
exactly, yeah.
may not want you to
Be
know.
careful what you wish for.
That's right.
There's no turning back.
Was not
Once you
easy.
open that box, it's done. Think carefully about what that
It
is.
was not easy for me to integrate, and I still deal with a lot of things that I
Well, see,
remember.
your situation is different because you had the memories come back. It's not like somebody came to you and told you, "Hey, I knew you on the spaceship up there, and it sucked for 20 years. You want to know?" We don't do that.
And that person up there, so when I was up there, I wanted to remember. I wanted to retain the memories. I wanted
Right.
to remember what I had done because I had gone from slavery to a small measure of freedom. It was a big accomplishment, even though I wasn't much. To me personally, emotionally, I had achieved much, and so I wanted to remember that. There was a lot I wanted to remember. So
Yeah. Great questions, guys. Keep them coming. Let's see what else we got here. Mark, I can't see your last name here. My vision's not doing too good right now. Tony, have you ever considered that your mind may have been installed, not wiped? Installed.
yes, I have considered that.
Really?
You're exact. Oh yeah, sure. Right. And the first thing I asked myself is, to what end? What am I doing because of that? And I think to a certain extent that they knew that I was going to remember and altered some things so that I would get a few things wrong, caused me to go left when I was supposed to go right, and may have programmed me somehow to do it. You know what I mean? And I think there may be some of that in there. I have to really accept the fact that I went through a blender. I put my brain in a blender more than once during that time. If all those memories are installed, to me, it's just too much. It's not like I remember a few days or one big dream of a few incidents. I remember a space battle. It's not like that. I remember waking up with the alarm and getting out of bed. I remember the cold floor. I remember the smell of it. I remember walking into the showers, waiting in line for a shower. I remember showering in the crappy soap. I remember the disposable toothbrush, and I remember doing that 1,000 times. So these are memories that, if they implanted it, that's a pretty badass system they've got there. I remember lovers. I've found people that I remember, and they're exactly how I remember them. I found the places that I went to, and they're exactly how I remember them. Seattle, Puerto Tawantinsuyo, Peru, Santa Marta, Colombia, Inyo Curtin. If they implanted all those memories, I got to think that they really lost their ass on that investment, because really, I mean, I'm not making a big splash. I'm really not. I'm not making a big splash. When you look at any of my videos, I think the most hits I've ever got was like 100,000. So I mean, I'm not a big name. I'm doing some talks and things. I'm putting this out there for history's sake. I think later down the road, 100 years from now, my testimony is going to be valuable. But as of right now, I think if somebody grabbed me, they abducted me when I was 10 years old and installed a bunch of memories that wouldn't surface until 2015.
What's the point of that?
For the bang for the buck, for that, It just doesn't make any sense. It seems like there's so much better they could do. Also, it seems like they would do it to 1,000 people or 100 people, or you know what I mean? Like I'm the only one with my story, with my account of things that have gone on. So other people have come forward, but their accounts are completely different, almost completely different. I'm the only one from the Nachtwaffen that talks about the series. Johann Fritz spoke about being had some overlap in his testimony, and he spoke about being on the Ceres colony, and talked about the hypoxia of the environment, which also overlapped my testimony. He was unaware of, and I said it before he came forward. So things like that happen. I just got, when you ask me that question, could I have been implanted? I wonder why, and it just makes more sense that it's real and I remember it to me.
That's a fascinating notion. I would never even thought of something like that even happening, but great question, guys. Yes or no? Are grays real?
Oh yes, you'll see.
You'll see.
We're gonna see. We're gonna see that before. If you stay alive, if you're alive another 10 years, you're gonna see some grays, buddy.
Hmm. How do you know that?
Disclosure is, the ball's already rolling. It's a snowball right now, and it's gonna be a giant avalanche here very quickly. It's going so fast.
Okay.
We're gonna get a disclosure.
Okay.
We're gonna get it. It's gonna happen in probably in 4 or 5 years, but there's no way they're going 10 years without disclosing. There's just not. It's too late.
All right. Ashley J asks, do you think they used a med bed to heal your arm when it got blown up while you were on the mission with the insectoid?
So I had lost a lot of blood, and and let me say that again. I had lost a lot of blood, and I was in that state of mind. I was just passed out. I mean, even when I was awake, they were slapping me, keeping me awake. I was still like losing consciousness. And as soon as we saw the doors to the place, he let me go. He let me go out, it wasn't asleep. It was unconscious, and I woke up fixed. So that I don't know. I don't know if they cloned me a whole new body, if they grew an arm on. I don't know. And they didn't really debrief me. They said there was a debriefing. So there were officers there, and there was medical personnel, and they told each other what happened. But I didn't care. I just wasn't. I just didn't care. I said, "Look, it works great." I was like, "It works great. It feels great," and I felt like brand new. I felt like $1,000,000 actually when I woke up the next day, and I was still in shock from the pain too. That's the other thing is the next day when I woke up, I was the first few moments of when I gained consciousness, I was still in panic mode from losing a limb. I remember that. I remember when I first woke up, I was still kind of in a panic, and I went, "Wow!" And I was recovering from that. I was processing the fact that the panic was gone while they were having that conversation. So I didn't give a shit what they were saying because I was still like, "Wow!" I was like, "It's gone." I was like, you know. The other thing I think that they did, I'm tempted to, I'm inclined to theorize that they grew a whole new body because that arm had been dislocated in Inyokern during the MK Ultra thing. They tried to break, one of the things they did was break our arms and make us watch movies. And then they asked us questions of how we felt. It was part of the trauma based. They would break a bone. And mine didn't break it, dislocated. They left it dislocated for the day, and then it popped back in place after a couple hours or a period of time. But later on in Seattle, it would come up. I would sleep certain ways, and it would dislocate. I'd wake up screaming in the middle of the night and have to pop my arm back. And it happened many times that I got my arm dislocated. After that circumstance, when they fixed me and healed me that day, I never suffered a dislocation again. So even though my arm was probably, I had like 4 or 5 inches of arm that was where the sever was, it was right in there. And where that was, the dislocation was much higher, and that was fixed as well. So that's all I got. I don't have a lot of information on the
It's a really interesting
tech.
perspective on that. So you don't know whether it was a med bed or something other because you were out. You were out.
Okay, and the other thing was the soldiers. So when we were in the mess hall, when we were having lunch or breakfast, the soldiers would often talk about how good the med section was, the medical section, God, what did they say? just the medical section. I'm having a hard time with words lately. You know what I mean? Just calling words on. Maybe I'm
Like
tired
the
or something.
hospital?
But yeah, the hospital. Well, whatever they called it, that the medical section. They said that they were super impressive about it. You'd be lucky if you ever make it back to there. And they were just everybody was amazed at what it could do. So they were aware of capabilities, other things that it could do more than me. But it was very very respected part of the base. And it was on the first floor, I believe. The second floor was the hangar. Sorry, the first level was ground level, and it was the armory and the hospital. And then the next level was access to the hangar bays, and the third level was administration. The fourth level was something else, and then the fifth level is where I was, and we had the cafeteria down there at the fifth level on the
Yeah,
bottom,
it's as they
and
say,
that's where I stayed.
like they say, the devil's in the detail. And guys, you're getting a lot of details here. Absolutely coming through here. Now, I'm not privy to what happened. What is this incident? What led to you losing your arm? She says she's asking about how it got. Did it get blown off? Did it get cut off? What?
It
What?
was bit
It was
off
bitten off.
by an insectoid,
Okay.
and my foot,
And your.
my right arm, and midair, I was jumping in the air, and an insectoid came up behind me and bit it, and kind of rode me down into a sand dune, and then it stood on me and held me down, and it lifted me, and I interacted with a mantid and begged for my life,
Yeah.
and I was in complete shock and losing blood quickly, and it let me go. There was an interaction, then it let me go, and the little beetles, they're smaller, the size of a dog. They're beetles, and they had like a vertical face and pinchers that came like that. And they were, you could tell, like I couldn't tell what they were saying, but you could tell that they were communicating just, by body language. And they were all making noise to the mantid. And he said, "Yeah, go ahead." And one of them bit my foot
No
off
way.
too, at the like for practice. And it got it right at the ankle, came right through my boot and everything, and bit right through it like nothing. And then they all uni- uniformly moved at the same time. The ones with wings, they all moved their wing, flapped their wings, and they all moved kind of at the same time and took off. And I was laying there on the ground bleeding, and I had an auto tourniquet on. We each had one auto tourniquet assigned to us. I put an auto tourniquet on. I pulled it, put it on me, and got my arm because it was losing the most blood. I crawled over the dune to a chopped up. Two guys were chopped into pieces, and I got into their pile of remains and got another auto tourniquet and put it on my foot. And I started crawling back towards the way I came, and I made it like 20 feet before which took a long time, and it was very painful. And but I was determined to live. I was told He told me I was going to live, and I was determined to live. The insectoid said, "You'll live. Go." And so I started crawling, and I was in a great deal of pain. And two soldiers came, and one of them carried me back to base.
What put you in that situation in the first place?
We were on a reconnaissance mission. We were in a combat mission,
Okay.
and we did three of them. This is the third one, and we were going out on reconnaissance missions. What we were dressed in bright white like golf balls out there, and what the plan was is for the insectoids to come and check us out, and other soldiers to be on a higher elevated position with a railgun and just shoot them
Mhm.
before they even got to us. And what the insectoids did was, on a windy day, it was windy, and they would go upwind and flap their wings and kick the dust up so that and then they could engage us. And they couldn't really see that. They could see through the dust. The soldiers could see through the dust. They had thermals and everything, but they couldn't engage as well as they did on a clear day. So that was an issue. And because they were kilometers away, they were far away. They were up on a mountain ridge looking down at us, and we were kind of in a valley. And they engaged us when we got far enough away to where we didn't have fire support.
This is wild stuff.
And
Holy smokes.
that's what happened. That was my third mission. And then because of the failure of that, because of casualties so quickly we were only there a month of actual on the ground mission, actually doing missions, that because there were casualties that quickly, they canceled the program. It wasn't supposed to be like that. The first few times we went out, I never had any contact with any insects, but they were all high fives. When we got back to base, everybody was high fiving like it worked. So they did inflict casualties on the insects, but they adapted much quicker than they were supposed to.
Let's go towards something a little light here. Danny B asks, did your family think you were weird?
Everybody thinks I'm weird. I am weird. What do you mean? Like when?
Well, I would
Though?
imagine,
Could you?
let's say, I'm assuming, I can't speak for Danny, but it seems you're coming back at the age of 10 and you've just gone through 20 years. Did you change?
I had a complete change in
Right,
personality,
right.
exactly. And my father, for years after that, said, "You changed. I want my son back. What happened to you? I want my son
Mm,
back." And he changed too. Our entire family dynamic changed that day. So I believe my father was taken as well. I don't know about my mom or my sister, but I believe myself and my father were taken.
mm,
Um, but yes, I wasn't the same. I was not a little kid anymore. And on the inside, I had a completely different personality. The whole innocence
uh-huh.
thing, you know what I mean, like a playfulness of kids. I went to school and I was awkward. I had friends at school, but I was not on the same page as the other kids, entertainment wise. There were just a lot of things, and also I was a before that I was an outstanding student. I totally lost interest in school at that point that day. From one day, I paid attention and loved class and did my one look forward, did my test, aced it. The next day, I could care
Mm,
less about any of it. I knew that it was archaic. I knew that the method of teaching of school was not the right way to do it
mm.
ever after. And I withdrew. By the next year, it was the end of the school year, my fourth grade. The next year in my fifth grade, I completely withdrew in all my grades, and I eventually dropped out.
Hmm. Here's an interesting question. This one almost speaks to the values, the mindset of those running the SSPs. How is this allowed, and why bother putting you back?
I get asked that a lot. That's a great question. Why bother putting you back?
Yeah.
Well, what happens when they run out of all of us? They don't put us back. You don't cut down the apple tree. They put me back because now they have my kids to choose from and yours. Do you understand? Like it's genetic. Not everybody can qualify for certain levels of the technology. Not everybody can go through a portal and not get cancer or get sick from it. There's a genetic marker that lets you do that. There's a genetic marker that lets you travel time better than others.
Hmm.
And it's not based on race. It's not like only white people can go. The Caucasian races genetics seem to be better at it and can do multiple 20-year tours. But there are certainly Africans up there. There are people of all racial backgrounds that go. But there's a genetic marker, and there's a certain level of awareness of consciousness that can survive uh, the process of what goes up there. So once you have somebody that can go, you don't kill them, you put them back and let them have children because their children are likely to be just as applicable to the program. So they put everybody back. Also, the technology is one of the first things traded to species. So when a species grows up on a planet and finally gets into space and comes in contact with another species, they of course want knowledge. They want trade. They want to trade something. And one of the first things they trade is life extension tech, the 20-year tour, the career return program. And it's heavily regulated. It's very widespread throughout the cosmos. It's a very useful thing. And we just abuse it. People just abuse it. So our military got it. They abuse it. They do what they want. They take girls for sex. They take boys for sex. They take people for hard labor. They take people for combat. It's just that mindset. But that's where we're at in our development. So it gets abused, but they take those people, and because there's time travel involved, it's regulated. Time travel throughout the cosmos is regulated by much higher life forms, higher level of awareness beings. People of we're not even a type 1 civilization. You're talking type 3 civilization regulates time travel. So they can't just go traveling time. If you watch the new show, the Marvel show, Loki, that's got the time variance authority,
Hmm.
my experience is that the time variance authority is not humanoid. They are a consciousness that lives outside of time space, more like a ghost that comes in and intervenes if there's a breach of interstellar law, time travel law. So, and I was told that there was a story on Ceres Colony by one of my ship crewmates, one of the officers or somebody that was in a German. He said that there was one instance where they were time traveling to try to cheat, and they were getting away with it. And finally, one of these entities came to him and made him live 1,000 years of they didn't say what, he didn't tell me what, but like a very undesirable life, like 1,000 years in mud or something,
Wow.
like,
Wow.
and then for 1,000 years, and then put him back that moment that they took him. They said the penalty for breaking the time travel laws is far, far, what do you call it? Stiff, worse than any gain you could get by going back in time and killing Hitler.
Right.
That's why people always ask that. Why don't they go back in time and do that? Because it'll get fixed. Right. So there was a way that they said there was loopholes that they did for time travel. All the races have a certain amount of time travel that they can get away with. There's a certain there's an allowable amount of manipulating the timeline, but there's a certain amount of time travel that is heavily regulated, and you will get punished quickly,
That's interesting. This next,
immediately.
yeah, thank you, Crystal. Be done. That was a great question. Next one up, it coattails onto what we were talking about just now, the time travel aspect. And I'm kind of with this person. Sparkimoto is the name of the YouTube person. They're saying, I'm trying to wrap my head around this 20-year and back program, how they actually put you on a different timeline at the start of your 20 years than after the 20. You move back to timeline one.
Well, okay, so that's why I believe so. I'm speculating now. So much like somebody that gets a kidney operation, you know what happened to you, but you don't know how they did it because you were put under and then you woke up, right? So it's the same thing. I went through that and I don't know exactly how they did it, but that's why I think that they clone you. I think there's cloning involved. And I think that while I was in Seattle in 1986, if Tony, that was in, I think I was in Ypsilanti, Michigan at the time, was still there at the same time. Like I could have possibly met myself. I believe that it was dualistic. So there were two of me. And because now, remember I said about my grades and everything. So that day after, I was really never the same, and I was a different person. 20 years forward, it was 18 years on the ground. There was a day that I woke up and I was a completely different person again. And that's what I found with working with other people. And I kind of got excuse my language, but I got my shit together that day. I couldn't have a relationship for the life of me. I couldn't pay a girl to be with me. I was this emotional wreck all through my teen years into my early 20s. 18 years later, which was 20 years, but I was doing time. Remember, I was doing temporal missions on the ship. So I did 20 years. But at the end of that 20 years, when that other clone died or was sent back, it's the same as a death. He was gone. All of a sudden, I had more awareness. I woke up one morning. I was renting a house with my sister and my cousin. We all went in. We rented a house. That's where I was living. I woke up one morning and I said, "It's over." I went, "It's over. It's over." And I kept saying, I didn't know what I was talking about, but I couldn't help but say it. I cleaned my room that day. I got my act together. It was like I was $1,000,000. It was like emotionally, I got it together. It was a few months later, I met my wife and I stayed with her. And my relationship was easy. It was easy. Before that, I couldn't even I couldn't date a girl for 2 weeks without turning into a wreck. You know what I mean? Like being emotionally weak. So I was dualistic, and I believe my consciousness was shared between the two. So instead of one Tony that had his act together, there were two that kind of were half-ass. And I think that's one version of the technology. And also, like, like they have a hydrogen bomb and they have a nuclear bomb. I believe there's other ways to do the same effect. I believe that other people have gone into the program and experienced a different set of technology that has the same result as the 20 and back, but it's a different thing. So I believe that cloning is the way. The other thing is cloning, and explains why when I woke up in Inyokern, the day I was taken, when I was 10 years old, and I woke up and started the 20 years, I had amnesia. I had no memory of mom or dad or the home. Then I did 20 years and I went through that process. And when they put me back, I had no memory of that 20 years, but I had my memories back of mom and dad in my home. So how did they put those memories back? Because I was taken out of one body put into the other one then put back, then put into this body, my consciousness, it's a tech. So what my memories were still in my body at that time, but it was probably a vegetable for 30 minutes. And then lived my life. And when I put back, they put my consciousness back and they killed the clone which was 20 years older. And then I woke up and I got my memories because they were local in that body.
Here's one for you. I mean, think about linear time. What year is it for the secret space program?
You mean since it
No,
started?
what year is it right now? I mean, here, because they seem to be traveling in time forward and backward, collecting people when they're 10 years old. You work, 20 years, they put you back, where are they in the
So it's the
timeline?
same. It's the same as it's been for us as when they leave. So I mean, it's been the Germans in the 20s. They got access to interstellar flight. So for them, it's been 100 years. And the United States was close behind in the 40s, late 40s. In the 50s, we got interstellar flight, or excuse me, anti-grav craft. And then the 70s and the 80s, it really ramped up. So they're on the same timeline. They just have access to time travel. So
So what's current for them? Is it somewhere 20 years in the future, 40 years in the future, 60 years, 100 years in the future?
they're 1,000 years in the future. They're 1,000 years in the future for us in lifestyle, not in reality. They're in our present day right now, but they're living in the future 1,000 years from now with access to that kind of knowledge. I think the question isn't fair. Um, I look at it like we're in a dual thing. And the other thing is a lot of the Germans alluded to the fact that they're going to live longer than me. That they have technology that on top of the 20 and back technology, they have medical technology that's going to extend their life. So they're going to live longer than we do. But they're on the same timeline up there right now. There are bases, there are colonies on the planets in our solar system, and on all the rocks, probably all the good sized rocks, anything with water probably has a colony on it
Yeah, but I'm just thinking,
as of
so my
today.
question has to do with current time. What is like today? It's here we are, June 25th, 2021. Somebody's been on a 20 back program, right? If they're put back today, that means that they're sending you back, but where are they currently right now? I mean, is it 20 years from now? Is it 40 years from now? What is their current time? What is their current date, month, day, year? Where are they coming from? It seems like, okay, if they're sending you back here, that's 20 years prior from their point of origin. I don't know, maybe I'm not asking the question correctly. I'm just trying
It's
to,
look, the time travel aspect of it is the most difficult to understand without it's easier to do it in
yeah,
diagrams, but so they go in 20-year increments, I was told, because anything longer than that per time for that family of technology, that method that I was taking, they go in 20-year increments because for all species, not just humans, because any more than that, and it greatly increases the chance of a mental handicap, of people going crazy, having some kind of mental problem when they go back. So they cap it at 20 years. There's a law. It was the law. They had to put you back after 20 years. You had to stop what you were doing. You had to be put back. And so some people have the genetics to go again. So you would be put back, live 20 years, and then they can take you and do it again. Uh, but as far as keeping track of like a calendar wise, what is today? I'm looking at it's 6/25/21. That's what day it is. And up there, it's the same time. They keep track of time differently. Like I said, it was like a 20-hour day on Ceres, and they had a different set of they still had Oktoberfest. They still had a yearly calendar. They had a yearly calendar, but it was completely different. And they would say when they were close to, or when the orbit got to perigee or apogee or whatever, when they got close to Earth, they say we are closest to Earth right now. They would tell everybody, and it was like not a holiday or something, but it was like something that people wanted to know. And so they had a different set. They had a different calendar that and they were skipped. They were just fine. They were just fine with it. They didn't have the same 12-month calendar. They didn't care about the sun like we do.
right.
But and I don't know if they did the years kept track of the years the same. It was different. I think it was shorter number, like they counted years from when they got in there. But time moved the same way. It's parallel.
Here's
It's hard. It's hard
Yeah, I'm just going.
to think
I'm
about.
still stuck on when are they at this moment? In time in the future. When are they? It's okay. We don't have to go there and beat this dead horse. We can.
Well, I mean, if you could get on a ship and fly there right now, you'd be there, and you would be 100 years after they got up there, or since they're however long they've been there already, you would meet them at that time. So if they left here in 1920, 100 years ago, and they've lived there 100 years, and if we flew there from here now, it would be right around 100
So about
years.
100 years.
Speed is relative too. So this is another thing I thought about recently is NASA could do this. Anybody could do this. When you think about the Voyager probe,
Yep.
it's been moving very fast. So slightly time dilating for the last, 40 years? When did Voyager go up? 70? Almost 50 years. It's been time dilating. So Voyager is in the past for us. We're older than Voyager. Do you understand what I mean by that?
Well, yeah, it launched in the 70s, and we're in 2021.
No, but I mean, it's been going faster. It's been going faster than we are, so it's slightly in the past. So, like, if an astronaut takes off and goes light speed, when they come back, we'd all be old
Right,
people, right? You'd be the same age. So Voyager is going not light speed, but it's going pretty fast. But it's been doing it for 50 years, so it's like 5 minutes in the past. So if there was a quantum entangled communication device, you could send a message to yourself in the past if you had
That's
communication
wild
with.
stuff. That's stuff that I haven't even ever thought
Well,
about.
what I'm
Yeah.
saying is this is something the government could do back then that exists. So they can send messages to themselves 5 to 10 minutes ago. Or 5 days. Who knows? They might have a clandestine. They might have back in the 70s. They might have put a probe. They might have had this technology and put a probe out there that's just in orbit, going fast in their solar system, and they can communicate with it with a quantum entanglement communication device, which is instant. So that means that you can talk to that, leave a message, and send it to yourself again in the past. However far it's time dilated. You just need a fast moving object, and rocket science can do this. You don't need antigrav to do this. So that means that there's a lot of speculation, and when you see how a lot of presidents do business and a lot of how the government, they seem to have some insight on things. This may be a technology that's real to them.
Yeah, they keep things close to the chest. A little surreptitious in their answers.
Well, I mean, sometimes they seem to know things that are about to happen. But I mean, as they probably can communicate with themselves 5 or 10 days in the past. So from the future, they can send messages back to the past, and they can make decisions based on that and alter the timeline that way.
Is there an age?
I'm getting a headache. I'm getting a headache from thinking about it.
Is there an age limit to start a 20 back program?
It seems like a lot of the people go around 12. A lot of the soldiers go around later, like 17. A lot of people are taken and groomed right from birth, like right out of the gate, like prenatal.
Really?
That they're grooming them and getting them ready to enter the program. The MyLabs kids are taken 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. They have memories, but it seems like a common entry point into the programs especially for females, is at 12 years old. Boys sometimes earlier than that, most of the time later than that, 15. The soldiers are later. People that are doing other things other than combat are earlier that they enter the program. So they're taken, but a common number that comes up over and over again for females, especially, is 12 years old.
Interesting. Great questions, guys. So this is all coming out of the chat feed. You guys have been totally awesome. Really appreciate this. Hope you guys are getting your questions answered. We've been on here for a few hours. How you doing?
We've been at it a while. Yeah, it's getting late.
Yeah, it is getting late, and we're getting close to dinner time here as well. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
Just please check out my website. If you have a hunch you were involved, there's some info there for you. If you're just into this, actually my website. So Jackie Pierce, my host, who's amazing. She's a medium. She does the talking to dead relatives thing professionally. She's amazing. Really, I mean, I was never skeptical, but I didn't think anybody could be that good at it. She's amazing at it. And once you just have one conversation with her, and if she does it with you, you'll be a believer. Trust me. But she's also very talented and helped me set up the website. And she did it in a way that looks like The website looks like there's not a lot of info, but there's a great deal of info there. There's a great deal of information at your hands. So about this subject and about my story. There's also a link to get purchase tickets. I'm going to be speaking at Mount Shasta at the conference in August 26th, I believe, at Mount Shasta. So I'm going to be doing a trip there and speaking live. That's my next speaking engagement. Check it out. If you're in the area, come on up and see me. I'd love to have you. It's Rob Potter's thing. But that's on the website too. But Tony Rodrigues with an S.com. It's, everybody spells Rodrigues with a Z at the end. It's just an S. I'm Portuguese. But TonyRodrigues.com. Check out my website. Yeah, you can contact me. There's links to my channels. There's links to free interviews. I think our other interview that I did with you is on there too, I believe, Walter. Um, just check it out, man, and spread the word, because these are hard conversations to have. People believe in ETs. People believe in UFOs. When you talk about time travel, you get the 1,000-yard stare. That's when you lose them. So it's a reality, though. We live in time space. We don't live in space, and that's something we're going to have to learn after a disclosure. And everybody if you meditate, if you pray, whatever you do, keep focusing on a positive disclosure event, a positive timeline for us, because mankind in general, and probably more than that, probably farther reaching out, is at a turning point right now in history. And this is we live in very big times. That's why you're here. That's what we are. When I was a kid, I thought I was special for some reason. I didn't know why, but now that I see the boat we're in as a mankind, we are special. All of us are special because we're living in a very special time. So, I know we're up to it. So thanks for having
All
me.
right, Tony, been real awesome having you on. You're welcome back anytime. I'm sure the audience would appreciate the opportunity to ask you many, many more questions, but it is time to wrap up. So to all the viewers out there, I want to thank you once again for tuning in. This broadcast will be archived out there on YouTube for the watch back. I'm sure most of you are aware of that. And I'll be updating the description field with all the links that Tony has provided as well. So with that, I'm going to bid everybody adieu. Have a nice night. For those of you in Norway ready to go to sleep, good night. For all the tips, really very much appreciate that as well. And we'll see y'all here next time. Good night. All right, Tony, sit tight. We're going to